think they just kind of want to let us know, making us aware.
Did I miss a survey result somewhere? Laura's over there talking right now to her, and apparently
We'll clear it up.
somebody did a survey, but it wasn't the city.
It's a question for staff.
Yeah, so we're not.
Interesting. All right. Whenever you're ready, Chairman.
Talking of a
Okay.
survey, I think it's Dirk that did this. That guy causes nothing but trouble. I actually got a notepad and that's what I can draw. There's some scribbled items that's fixed. I can't.
Oh, he'll break it before we're done.
I never touched it when I came.
Okay, I will call to order the Monday, April 22nd, 2019 meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission. First item on the agenda is public comments on any topic that is not on our agenda. The only cards I have relate to the item on the agenda, unless you're aware of something else. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to comment on anything that's not on the agenda?
I'm not sure. I'm very confused about whether it is on the agenda or not on the agenda.
Do you want to bring her up?
Okay. Come on ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm Patty Webb, and I'm with Friends of Kenema. So I'm going to hope I can get this out in 5 minutes. If not, bear with me. There's several topics, and I kind of ran them all together in one. That's why the confusion. A friend of mine sent me a copy of a survey about historical code changes in Kenema. Otherwise, I would have never known anything about it. I have several concerns. With only 110 households in Kenema and a mailing list online, why were only a few responses taken from Kenema and so many outside of Kenema? Why are some responses from Kenema missing from the results? Is it pertinent to ask whether a participant owns or rents a historic home? Does this affect the result? Who chose the participants and why? Why were Kenema residents not sent the survey? This is an inaccurate, poorly distributed survey and does not represent a truthful or accurate opinion of Kenema homeowners. This bogus survey should not be considered as part of the process because, in my opinion, it was distributed with great bias and the purpose of tailoring the results. It's time for the HRB to start looking after the best interests and safety of Kenema residents, to stop trying to circumvent and bypass the historic codes to save money for builders and developers whose only interest in Kenema is to get around the codes and facilitate new construction as cheaply as possible. It's time for the HRB to have leadership willing to fulfill the promises made in Measure 1, the HRB purpose statement, and the true spirit in which it originated. So few buildable lots are left in Kenema. Please help us ensure what's left is handled appropriately to enhance Kenema, not detract from it. I'd like to add 2 more things if possible. A letter from Paul Edgar to another resident was published in the results section of this survey, along with his personal email address. I think whoever decided to do that knew it was wrong and should be disciplined in some way because it feels very retaliatory. I'd also like to say for myself and for Paul, who is unable to be here tonight, we are in agreement that 3 and 4 plexes have no place in Kenema, especially built vertically. Anyone that thinks that's a good idea really does not understand or care what Kenema exists for and the importance of keeping it. It should be at least one place protected from inappropriate anti-historic building. Please help us keep Kenema. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Patty, if you don't mind, I'll take a copy of that written stuff and then I'll put it in our topic later tonight regarding 3 and 4 plexes.
Sorry for the confusion.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, are there any other public comments not related to the agenda? All right, at this point, we'll move on to the next item, which is the public hearing for land use item GLUA-18-000038 and several items underneath that. Do we typically do should we do the staff report before I read the script, or does the script go first? Which is?
Typically you go first.
Okay, all right. We're holding a public hearing tonight on land use application. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, I'll ask the commissioners whether they have any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the commissioners have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any commissioner about their disclosures. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedures that the Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. Hearing procedure steps are shown in the chart on the wall. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city will notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised on the record for the consideration of the City Commission or LUVA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. So now we will open the public record for file number GLUA-18-00038. And I will ask all of the commissioners if they have had ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest, or if they have visited the site. Mr. Mahoney.
No contact and no visit to the site.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson?
No contact. I did drive by it late last week. Just
Okay.
looked around it.
Thank you. Commissioner Stoll?
None.
Did you visit?
I did not.
Okay.
We're having a minor technical issue.
Technical difficulty?
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties with Commissioner Giles' screen at the moment, so.
Okay.
Did you
Commissioner
ask
Gao.
me something?
Ex parte contacts or did you visit the site?
Yes, I visited the site just before I got here,
Okay.
but I don't know what ex parte anybody over there, so no.
Okay.
I visited the site a couple days ago, there was no one there, no ex parte contact.
I visited the site today. I had no ex parte contact, but there was a couple on the porch and I just let them know what I was doing staring at their property. But we didn't have any conversation.
You didn't talk about it?
No, not at all,
She was
not
casing
All right.
the
whatsoever.
place.
And I have no ex
I
parte
specifically
contacts,
photographed
and I
that
did visit the site.
It is strange when people stare at your house.
And Chair Mitchell, some of the
Yes.
attachments aren't working on the screen, and that's what all the fuss was about. So if you need, Christina has attachments in her presentation or images. If you need any more, just let us know and we can bring them up on a computer.
Okay, great. All right, does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the commissioners about the disclosures they've just made? Okay, seeing none, we'll commence with the planning staff report.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. So this evening, we have this consolidated application. Normally subdivisions and this type of natural resource overlay district review is a staff level type 2 review. But in this situation, the applicant was also requesting a planning commission variance for rejection of the quarter side yard setback of lot 1, and therefore the package gets sent up to the planning commission. So I'll walk through both the variance criteria as well as the general application and the proposed conditions of approval. So a little bit of background, the subject site is located east of Hiram Boulevard between Rock and Gaines Streets. It's specifically 16362 Hiram Avenue. There currently is a single-family home on site and an outbuilding. The single-family home is proposed to remain and the outbuilding will be removed as part of the subdivision. The applicant is proposing the creation of a new public street within a 5-lot subdivision. Once again, lot 1 will include the existing home. The subject site has an existing stream on the north end of the property and is in the Natural Resource Overlay District. It is a intermittent or ephemeral stream, which means it has a 15-foot buffer on either side. The applicant is requesting development services approval for an off-site intersection and reduced street width for a portion of the street, and I'll show that in future slides. And as part of this application, when you are looking at a subdivision that includes a tract with a natural resource overlay district, you have an ability to count some of that unbuildable tract in your lot averaging. So it's a type 2 clear and objective process, and the applicant is also pursuing that as part of this application. And why you're here tonight, of course, is the application for the side yard setback reduction for the existing house on lot 1. So this is the subject site. You can see the property, the existing house is on the bottom left-hand side of the 2 parcels of the subject, and the detached garage is kind of right at the property line between the 2 properties, and that detached garage will be removed as part of the subdivision application. The property is zoned R8, so around it are R6 zoned properties, R8, and farther afield are some R3.5 and R10. So this is in the Park Place neighborhood. So there's generally a variation of different single-family residential zones, R6, 8, and 10. This is the existing condition of the intermittent or ephemeral stream called Stream A. It doesn't have any more signifier than Stream A.
What do you mean by intermittent? Sorry.
Intermittent means it doesn't run all year long.
Okay.
It generally is running with the storm runoff, though just because you have a dry area, you can still have a perennial stream that is dry, but through the natural resource report, which is attached to this application, a wetlands biologist did a delineation and made the official findings that it was an intermittent, or we call ephemeral stream.
That's what I thought, I just
Yeah.
wanted to clarify.
So the way the Natural Resource Overlay District works in Oregon City is the larger pink buffer is kind of, if your property is in our larger pink buffer, then you're brought in for review. And so what the applicant did is pay for a natural resource delineation. And so that delineation, you see the reduced section through a wetlands biologist report, the actual delineation is the smaller kind of blue amoeboid inside the larger pink buffer. Here's 2 photos of the existing property. This came from Google Maps. You'll see the top photo is the existing house to your right and the detached garage to your left. And on the bottom, this photo is right where the stream hits the storm drain at Hiram Avenue. So as I talk a little bit about the conditions of approval, this comes into play. The applicant initially proposed that there would be no need for mitigation because the stream was being delineated and the tract was going to be dedicated as a non-buildable portion. But the city's requirement for street improvements, specifically sidewalk and planter strip, gets built right where you see that storm drain. Therefore, that sidewalk and planter strip is built into perpendicular to the stream, and therefore that small portion of where the stream and the sidewalk meet will require mitigation. And so there's a clear and objective condition of approval, and I don't think it's going to be more than maybe 30 or 40 square feet of impact in the Natural Resource Overlay District. But at the time that the subdivision goes through construction review and before platting, they will come up with a final square footage of required mitigation, and then they will hire a wetlands biologist to put a mitigation plan in, and we'll plant that in the natural resource tract. So if you look, the next slide, oops, excuse me.
Christina, do you prefer we save our questions about something like that till later, or ask you right where you?
You can ask me right now, that's fine.
Did we not, Laura, look at a house in the same thing on Hiram, next to a stream bed, where they were going to put a cement wall? I remember something a few years back where somebody was building a home for their kid, and they was right alongside a stream bed, similar to this.
There was a variance request, well, an adjustment
remember that?
request, yeah.
And
on
it's
a
not
s-
this area here, that was a different area.
It's part of the same stream, I believe, yeah.
So-
yeah. Different location. but-
Because we were wondering, I mentioned I'd been there, and I was going, where's the stream? Because I remember when we discussed it before.
Yeah.
And so if it was a stream, I was wondering where that water there, does it go under the road, or does it just go down into runoff?
It goes in under the road at this point.
And does the stream continue? And then, again, I looked and I didn't see where,
Yeah,
it-
it
it's
does
probably dry
continue.
right now after
Yeah,
the floods.
it does continue. It is piped for a little bit and then it opens up again.
So the stream's gonna come down, go into that, and then continue on the other side.
Yeah. So what exists today, it is piped under the street today. And so the difference between what you see in the bottom photo and the completed is that the section where the new sidewalk and planter strip, that area in the natural resource overlay district boundary will require mitigation. And the way our natural resource overlay district works is there's a very clear and objective path for mitigation. You basically look at, it's a specific number of bushes or shrubs and trees for a specific amount of impact. And so in the staff report, you will see that the condition basically says for the applicant at the time of construction to provide staff the final square footage of impact, and based on that, prepare a mitigation plan and where about the number of trees and or shrubs that are required. It's not gonna be that much, and it's probably gonna be a couple of trees and a couple of shrubs based on that impact area. But then they have the whole of tract A to plant there. So they are gonna plant that mitigation for the sidewalk and planter strip in the natural resource tract.
So it's intermittent, even on the other side, is it intermittent?
The whole stream, that stream section
So
is
it's not a
intermittent.
fish carrying or anything
No,
else,
it's
kind
not,
of a
it's
stream?
not correct. It's not a
Okay.
fish-bearing stream.
All right, so it's just a runoff, that's all it really is.
Well, it's an intermittent stream,
Okay.
which means
Run.
it runs with the water year.
Okay. All right, thanks.
This is a proposed plat, and I want to point out a couple things. One, you'll notice the offset intersection between Gaines Street and the new street's about 25 feet. And you'll pretty quickly realize why there's an offset intersection request, and that is really to retain the existing house. If you ran Gaines Street through, you would basically be running it through where the existing house is. So this offset intersection allows the house to stay in lot 1. And John Replinger and our Development Services Department both looked at that request and thought it was reasonable for the low traffic volume of this subdivision to have a 25-foot offset. The second request that Development Services is proposing, that the applicant's proposing and Development Services is approving is a 40-foot right-of-way in kind of the straight portion of the proposed new street. There will be street parking allowed in the eyebrow area, but in the 40-foot right-of-way between lot 2 and 1, there will be no on-street parking. On-street parking can be found on Hiram and once again, that kind of eyebrow section of the proposed street.
So there would also be no parking between 1 and 5?
Between 2 and 5. Oh, between lot 1 and 5, correct. No,
Yeah.
yes, correct.
Not between 1 and
Sorry.
2 and not between 1 and 5?
Correct.
Okay.
How would you propose parking on Hiram? I just went down there, I thought it was an alleyway, it was so narrow.
Because they're gonna be dedicating right away and
But
building.
how could you park there when it's
gonna be
so narrow?
It's gonna be wider.
And just in that area, so we're gonna go Hiram like this, all of a sudden wide, and then back to the narrow
Correct. And that's
again.
generally what happens over the,
That's gonna look strange.
that generally happens whenever you have kind of this interval of subdivisions over time, is you do have some odd street sections, but the idea is over time, they get infilled, and then the street becomes the wider street.
How's that gonna work with fire and in that area there to get through, narrow,
Sure.
wide, and then narrow in
Sure.
there?
The fire department worked with Development Services, and there is a requirement for a fire truck turnaround in Lot 5 in the interim until such time that the street continues.
So where's the turnaround gonna be on lot 5? if they're gonna
It's a
build it?
condition of approval that the applicant will have to provide at the time of construction review and construction of the street.
Okay.
So why we're here tonight is this variance request. So I'm gonna go back really quickly. It is normally 15 feet for a corner side setback. And so the applicant is proposing 6.5 feet. Just to show you, I'm going to go back, the side of the house you see up on the top is the side of the house that would be closest to the corner setback. So this has no windows right here. And I know you can't see my arrows, but this is, goodness, this is the elevation, north elevation that'll be next to the reduced corner side setback.
And is
Sorry,
that-
say it again?
So this is the elevation right here, the north elevation of the house with no windows. That will be next to the reduced corner side setback. So I'll show this again,
So you said
Right
the
here.
normal setback is 15 and they're asking for only 6?
right there at 6,
That's the setback to the sidewalk or to the street?
to the back of sidewalk. 6.5 feet to
And
the
is
back
that
of
to the
sidewalk.
siding or the gutter?
That would be the foundation.
To the foundation? So if the gutter hangs over 2.5 feet, that's,
Usually overhang is about 1.5 feet.
looking at the house, I think it's more.
It's more.
It looked like about 2.5.
Oops, goodness. Well, I know it's proposed as 6.5 feet from foundation.
Okay.
So these are the variance grounds that are in the staff report and really what the planning commission is looking at this evening. And one, that the variance is not likely to cause substantial damage to adjacent properties by reducing light, air, safe access, or other desirable or necessary qualities otherwise protected by this title. B, that the request is the minimum variance that would alleviate the hardship. C, granting the variance will equal or exceed the purpose of the regulation to be modified. D, any impacts resulting from the adjustment are mitigated, and no practical alternatives have been identified that would accomplish the same purpose and not require variance. And F, the variance conforms to the comprehensive plan and the intent of the ordinance being varied. So just to sum up kind of staff's findings related to this, I'll go grab my notes. So in general, this is a perfect example of the complexities of an infill subdivision. You have an existing house that's next to a street that you have to have an offset intersection. There's a natural resource overlay district. The applicant is looking to keep kind of existing housing stock, and the applicant could demolish the house and build new, but looking at keeping the existing house as a housing stock in the city. And you have kind of Oregon City's requirements. You can't have flag lots if there is an opportunity to provide additional street connections. And Park Place is a good example of not a lot of opportunities for east-west connections between streets, or in general, just the need for more connectivity as infill development happens. And so staff does support this request. Specifically, the practical alternatives really would be either the reduction of a lot, which is a feasible opportunity, but if we're looking at utilizing our land efficiently, it's not necessarily, the most practical in the sense of larger cities' goals of making sure that as development comes in, we are utilizing our land efficiently. And two, that the mitigation and impact is reduced, because I'm going to go back. In this situation, you have an existing condition with the house, and any new properties that purchase into the lots 2 through 5 have an existing condition. And so this isn't a situation where you're building closer to an existing property. This is a house that's already there. And so staff did not see any need for mitigation because all new lots would be moving forward the development with that existing condition and knowing that that was there. And so what you'll see in the staff report, specifically that clear and objective condition for the sidewalk mitigation, both Development Services and John Mecklinger, our transportation consultant, did find that the offset intersection could be allowed and was a safe proposal. The allowance for the reduced street width in those areas identified, and the NROD lot averaging is a very clear and objective process, but the applicant did provide the math that allowed them to do that. So in this situation, staff is proposing conditional approval of this application. So I'm available if anybody has any more additional questions.
Yeah. Are there gonna be any, no parking signs, or how will you regulate nobody parking on the street?
Correct. In Oregon City, when we do have reduced widths, there will be there is striped no parking or working with the development services for, marked at the crosswalk, marked at the curb that there's no parking. So development services has different kind of options that you can do, but absolutely, when there is no available parking, that is signed.
So with that in mind, the same question, are these gonna have attached garages?
So infill in Oregon City, we don't require review of what type of garage, so we looked at, and I'll go back to, oh, I'm sorry, I went the wrong
So
direction.
again, I'm concerned about traffic.
Yeah.
I think I saw
Driving on
something.
Hiram, it's just a mess.
So we generally look at the opportunity for at least a parking spot per lot, and in this situation, we do have that. You have a parking spot available on Hiram for lot 1.
On Hiram again.
Yeah, lot 2, and once again, this is a dedication for Hiram to be widened to allow on-street parking, not existing condition. Then lots 3, 4, and 5 through the eyebrow, there has been a finding that working with development service, there can be an opportunity for both a curb cut and parking spot available on those 3, 4, and 5.
So you're
in the
suggesting
eyebrow.
that 3, 4, and 5 could have garages, but we don't know for sure. And so that's putting 1 and 2 on Hiram itself.
3, 4, and 5 have the opportunity for an
Have the
on-street
opportunity,
parking
but no
spot.
guarantee.
But they also could have a garage.
Yeah,
They
We're not-
could,
we're not
but we
being-
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. we
so
Why
there
can't
is
you
an
have a
opportunity
garage?
for 5,
It could.
sorry.
There's no-
I'm concerned
there's no
about
curb cut.
on-street parking. We discussed it for years in the planning, and we're just pushing all these cars onto the streets. Hiram, they may widen it, but Hiram's still pretty narrow, and then you're gonna have all these cars parked there that could have had driveways, is my thought.
There is an opportunity for both curb cut driveway access on lots 3, 4, and 5, and 3 on-street parking spaces. So in Oregon City, we don't regulate what type of off-street parking is, like be a garage or just a driveway pad. But we look at, generally, is there availability for each lot in a subdivision to have access to on-street parking? In this situation, it does. So our development services found that it met the requirements for approval of a modification.
And just to be clear, there is no criteria that any property have a garage or a parking space on their own property, or that they have an off-street parking in front of their home
So we
either.
continue to push cars out onto the streets.
We do have
I mean,
cross
we had
sections
this
that are
discussion
approved.
last year.
We have cross sections where we want on-street parking,
Oh, God.
or that can accommodate
That's
on-street
when
parking
a
if people
fire
want to use
truck
it.
can't get through, and I've seen that on our street with 2 fires. Cars parking on the street, the fire trucks can't get through. And we're
The
a
fire
wide street.
department is a part of our process, and they do definitely have input, both in this application specifically, but as well as our standard
But they
street
probably don't assume
sections.
that there's gonna be cars blocking their way on the road.
No, they do. They assume, we have street sections that assume on-street parking, taking up a certain width.
The other question I have beyond parking, I wrote notes to it. They're asking for a setback of less than even half of the 15 feet that we normally require, 6.5. So that overhang is gonna be there, but it just seems to me, you've got this curb cut, why wasn't lot 2 pushed back a little bit so that this would open up a little bit? You know what I'm saying, is why is the road gonna be cut so close to this one to only have 6.5, where you could have done it on that side where a new home's gonna be placed?
So this is a perfect example of when you are trying to work on an infill subdivision, you have all these competing pieces, right? So one, you want an intersection ideally to have no offset, right? You would ideally would like your streets to be exactly continuing. What you do, we allow up to like a 25-foot offset, which is just a little bit of an offset. What you don't want is even a further offset. When you have about 50 feet or 60 feet, then that is actually an unsafe intersection and much harder for people turning right and left. And so our development services, our transportation engineers do not support larger offset intersections. So either in this situation, you have an applicant who would have to have Gain Street exactly lined up, and therefore the existing house would be removed. And then you potentially might not have a very buildable lot to the south. Having the minimum offset, which is proposed, allows the house 1 to stay, but also have a buildable lot in lot 2, because you also have tract B, which is the natural resource overlay district. So you kind of have these opposing forces from the north and south, kind of really constraining what you could do on that situation. Let's see, oh, in the situation for the, having the reduced width in that area is really pretty much to allow that, is to allow a lot to be designed north of the intersection and the house to remain south of the intersection.
The 6.5 foot right of way that we're being asked, or setback that we're being asked to approve, this is just hypothetical. Does that just extend for the length of the side of the house? For example, if they were to come back and say, you know, we're losing our detached garage, we want to put a garage now behind the house, could they do it 6.5 feet, or would the 15 feet still apply?
That's a good question. We can, if the planning commission wants to further clarify that as part of the findings, that can be definitely done as part of any findings this evening.
But there would be no curb cut on that side.
Well, they've got it marked. They've got a proposal there for a curb cut.
Yeah, there's a
On the-
proposed
Oh,
curb cut
right
right here.
No, right,
Right here.
yeah, right over,
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
right there.
all right.
So my
sure.
question is, if they decided to put a detached garage on that property, we could condition it so that
Absolutely.
it would have to be the 15
So
foot
I think
setback.
you make a good point. I think it was for this proposal, but to further clarify and make sure that there is no ambiguity in the planning commission's decision, that can absolutely be added to any motion this evening.
Did I read somewhere in here that they were supposedly R8s?
Yeah,
This isn't,
I just added them all up, but this doesn't come up to R8s.
there's a big one.
That big one, but I
Correct.
just added them and averaged them out with 5, and it doesn't come to, it's more like R7s, but.
so correct, and that's allowed when you have a stream on your property. So all of tract B
This
is
tract.
unbuildable.
Yeah.
So that whole tract, that whole 9,360 square foot tract is unbuildable. And
But
so
didn't you
you'll
say it can be included in, didn't you
So
say that?
half of the square footage can be included in the
I see.
analysis.
Okay.
And so that tract will either be owned by the city or it'll be owned by a homeowners association. And so the conditions of approval will allow that, that decision to be made prior to plat.
Okay, so I got one last thing. So they're obviously trying to balance the whole development as good as possible. They're trying to save the house, they're trying to keep the offset to a minimum. I've seen houses costing twice as much bulldozed for development. So my guess is this is not a high-end development, it's more of entry level. Do we know the price point they're going for here?
So
Or is this
we
gonna be
don't
the
get in-
smallest
yeah.
house, the rest of them are gonna be big?
So we don't get involved in that. That's actually not a criteria for approval and honestly should not be a criteria for approval.
Right.
What, kind of what, why planning is definitely supporting this application is, keeping existing housing stock, especially kind of modest homes like this is one of the best ways the city can support equitable housing.
Yeah.
And so in this situation, we have an applicant who could have chosen to demolish the house.
Or
And a
move
new
it.
house could have been built.
They could turn it, there's,
Yeah, so that house, the applicant, if the applicant chose to demolish the house on lot 1, this would not be here this evening in front of the planning commission. The applicant is choosing to retain the house and therefore necessitates the setback reduction. So on a sense for planning's, review of this, to see that the applicant is moving to a level of where they want to go in front of a public hearing, pay the money for a public hearing to retain the house, tells me that that's important to them, as well as adding as well as keeping modest housing stock in the city.
A lot of questions about this, but I drove down there many times. I've driven down Hiram. And I drive down there, I look at that house, and I'm going, okay, they're gonna build all new homes. The 2 new homes on Hiram stick like sore thumbs. They're new, they're modern, and the rest of them are all small, look like they're from the 20s or 30s. And I keep thinking, okay, who would want to buy a house in that area with that house, that older home there? Because sooner or later, who knows, it may come down. That's not a basis of criteria, but I was looking at that and going, you're gonna have all new homes there, and that one's gonna stay, and I wonder, wow, that's gonna look so strange in that neighborhood for all the residents.
we have
What's
it in our
great
neighborhood.
about the real estate market is we don't have to be the ones to choose that. There's,
No, I just don't think
everyone
that-
comes and purchases homes with their own
It may
needs
be-
and
I
wants
still don't think
and
we're ever gonna
desires.
get to equitable homes, but that's another point.
Well, if anything, it'll make their homes harder to sell if they got an eyesore in the front. So
That's what I was thinking.
I mean,
Any other questions for staff?
The only other thing I would add to that is in the proposed code amendment package before the city commission, the corner setback is proposed to be reduced to 10 for all properties in the future.
All
Instead of,
properties in the future, not just this one?
Well, in the zoning designation, but
In
all low
R8
density
or-
residential will move to be the same corner side setback, which is 10. So the standard will move to be 10,
In
If
R6,
it's
R8, R10, or
yes,
anywhere?
in the low density residential. So just to, not that it is relevant, but to point out the context.
Another question for you, sorry I'm full of them tonight, but you're saying that the fire department is asking for some kind of a change to lot 5 until that road goes through, but if it doesn't go through for years, how is lot 5 gonna have any?
So there's a fire
Front
truck,
lawn.
a fire truck turnaround will be required. And so oftentimes that looks like a little bit of a, it allows the fire truck, sends a longer driveway to
Does
do
that cut
that
down lot
turnaround.
5 is my question, because
Can it be
they're gonna have to have
developed before
space for that.
That, there's a condition of approval and the applicant will have to meet it. And they often do. I mean,
Could you put a
the
house?
design of the fire truck turnaround is not at this level. Those designs often happen at the time you get to development review with development services and get your construction permits. But that is a condition of approval, is to have an ability for the fire truck to turn around through lot 5.
So I saw game, where does this one attach, is there a road that's already there that's gonna ultimately come up and connect with this one?
It turns into a cul-de-sac.
And the, you know what I'm
Here, we
asking?
can go back.
I was driving around looking
Sure.
to see.
So you'll see here, you have a property right here. This is a 2-lot partition that happened. And I know actually one of the owners of this is coming, will be speaking after. There's some opportunity to continue the street, and once again, when you show a street continued, you don't know what year that's gonna be continued. It could be next year, it could be in 25 years. So we look at making sure that we continue having access of new properties off of streets rather than serial partitions with flag lots. And so the right here is where the dead-end street.
Right, I'm going, where's it got to go? Because there's
Well, it could
holes there.
potentially hook up, there's a larger parcel right here
Uh-huh,
that could potentially get access. So a couple more homes could get access off of that. To the north, of course, is the natural resource overlay district, but you'll see the properties above it, the same kind of situation where you could potentially get another small street in with some infill. So we try to do our best to promote new public streets in our subdivision proposals and our subdivision code.
could you repeat for me, how wide is the road gonna be on Hiram right in front of that development?
Sure, let me take a look at the conditions of approval. I have to quote what development services
How wide is
proposed.
Hiram now, but how
Sure.
much would it be widened for that area?
Well, our local street section is 53 feet, so most likely what you're gonna see from the condition of approval is our development service staff requiring the applicant to dedicate the amount of feet that are required to meet their half-street requirement for 53 feet.
Hiram looks like it was for covered wagons, it's that narrow.
So 1 second, Mr. Gao, I'm gonna look for the development services proposal.
That must have been an old street in an old day.
Wagons.
Do-do-do-do.
Sure about the extension.
Sorry.
Can you see that?
That's how it would end up looking.
This is a classic example of why infill development does not
It just turns into a dead-end cul-de-sac, which seems to.
coordinate
Okay.
well
Doesn't go
with traffic systems, because you don't have a lot of options,
Yeah.
design-wise.
That's true.
Right.
And Tom, I agree with you on the off-street parking and traffic safety. And I think that the city's gonna ultimately have to come to grips
Yeah.
with this. I don't know if it's gonna be part of this application or not, but, you gotta ask yourself, have they done everything they can with the resources they've got at their hand? And that's
Yeah.
the size of the parcel. And, so some of the other limitations, that natural resource, area sticks out like a sore thumb. So, it might be a classic example of infill, but it's also a classic example of problem solving.
Commissioner Gao, I
Yes.
have the answer.
Thank you.
You have a 54 feet of right-of-way of a local street in Oregon City. Local streets require 53 feet of right-of-way. So the applicant, condition of approval number 20, and I'll read it. The applicant shall provide the following along the frontage of Hiram Avenue on the subject property, side of the center line. So of course you have a center line, and so whenever you do land use applications, we look at center line in. So this is what an applicant's required to do, is their frontage improvements to the center line of the street. It is 27 feet of right-of-way consisting of 16-foot wide pavement, half a foot curb width, 5-foot wide landscape strip, and 5-foot wide sidewalk. So in that 16 feet, you have 8 feet of travel lane and 8 feet of parking. And that is a traditional local street section where we have 2 8-foot travel lanes of both directions, two 8-foot parking areas of parallel parking, and then you have the 5-foot planter strip and 5-foot sidewalk, and with the curb. So that gets you the 54 feet. So what's proposed here is ensuring that there is an 8-foot travel lane, 1 foot for parking, and then the 10-foot planter strip sidewalk. That is condition
Have
approval
you ever
number 20.
driven Hiram? It looks like you have to pull over to let somebody by
Right, so,
sometimes.
so you will see in this section, Hiram will get wider in this section and will allow on-street parking in front of the
And
the
did I
street
hear you
lot.
say there were gonna be sidewalks there?
Correct.
Because I was thinking, Hiram, that would be the only sidewalks in the whole area of Hiram, and there's just nothing on Hiram. So
That's why they're doing it now, is because if you don't do it now, then same argument's gonna be made the next time.
well,
So
just,
if you
that's
do
gonna
these,
look so
then
out of
they can
place
put in-
there.
So there are other opportunities for development along Hiram, and this triggers our city street improvements, this proposal.
How does this relate to the traffic system plan that we've adopted?
So, the transportation system plan, when you have a small subdivision like this and you have, less than, I believe, is it 20 PM peak trips, when you have really small subdivisions, you are looking at, your contribution to any one intersection is too small to look at off-site improvements. And so in this situation, small subdivisions like this, our transportation planner is looking at kind of more on-site traffic safety issues, so site distance. So we looked at the off-site intersection, and he looked at our transportation policies related to safety. Now, every single-family home that's built will pay transportation system development fees. So while these small subdivisions might not have off-site impacts because they're so small, there's only 4 really new homes as part of this, their system development fees will go into the capital improvement plan, and that money will be used to work on proposed capital improvement fixes to our system. So it's only much larger subdivisions that may be triggered for off-site impact outside of the system development fees they
Well,
pay.
it doesn't apply to the internal design of the street then.
Well, that's where transportation engineer looked at the street design and found that it was safe and supported both street width reduction and the off-site intersection.
So if we get off-street parking on both sides of that street,
Yeah.
what kind of a pathway in terms of width are we looking at for the safe?
Are you talking about Hiram or?
Oh, I'm talking about the internal subdivision.
Well, it's 20 feet of pavement, the internal street where there is no parking.
Those are my points, Bob.
Just
Right
to
here.
support, the TSP identifies our standard street sections and both in this application directly and when we do on the TSP and our code, which ultimately adopted these street sections from the TSP. There is conversations with the fire department about how much width they need. And fire trucks often drive down all sorts of streets and lanes, and so it's one of the items on the list that when we create our standard street sections to make sure that we have enough safe passage for all cars, including fire trucks, and then also we do this additional review to make sure that they can turn around when we have partial streets that are built as well.
That the fire trucks can get down streets without cars parked on both sides.
With cars parked on both sides.
'Cause I
Okay.
I live on
So-
a White Street.
All of our standard street sections take into account the width of fire trucks, and there are various widths, but the width of a fire truck to make sure that there can be safe passage even with parking. If there can't, then that's where you'll see parking on one side or something like in this scenario, or one of those parking lanes dropped because this review process worked and we realized there's not enough space.
Okay, other questions for staff? All right, well, 15-minute maximum from the applicant.
Oh, good evening. My name is Tom Sissel. I'm here representing Mr. Lemon, who is also in the audience. And my mailing address is 375 Portland Avenue, Gladstone. And I just want to go clear up a few things here. I will say, in general, we're not going to challenge any of the proposed conditions of approval, but there was questions raised, concerns raised, and I'll try to address those as I can. First of all, Christina, could you roll back to where you show the zoning map? Okay, first of all, I want you to point out the blue arrows are actually the two lots to the south of this parcel.
Oh, shoot.
So when you look at that, it should be the two parcels.
I apologize.
They're actually this very similar shape, but it's the two parcels to the north. So that's, I wish to clarify that. Okay, and if you could go to the zoning, or to the subdivision map, please. Okay, so there's been quite a bit of questions about the fire turnaround and the parking. And first of all, in terms of the fire department turnaround, there was discussion about it being on lot 5, but actually lot 5 is shown to be 60 feet wide, and that would be the minimum leg of a 3-legged turnaround for a fire department. So it can't actually go on lot 5. It will likely go back into the cul-de-sac somewhere, and I'm thinking just as an engineer and how I would lay it out a fire department turnaround, it might be on the shared property line between lots 3 and 4 potentially, and in that area as for a turnaround. We're showing driveway approaches, but some of those driveway approaches may get adjusted as we go through the process. But the intent is to build off-street parking facility for lot 1 where the existing home is. There was question, well, would we do a 6.5-foot setback for that possible future garage? And if there was to be a garage built there, I would expect that it would have meet the minimum garage setback of 20 feet from the property line, and the lot is, over 65 feet deep, so there's room to have a garage and 20 feet in front of it for the setback. And I think the side to the south would probably can be considered a side yard setback and would be something less. So I think there's plenty of room. And also, lots 3, 4, and 5 are all deep lots. As you'll see, the mention there on the south side of lot 5 is over 120 feet deep. So the homes can be placed pretty deeply on these lots and leave a lot of room in front for vehicles. I mean, I would expect that we're probably looking at least at 2-car garages on all these homes. I don't know what size homes they will be, what level of dollar value the homes will be, but I expect there'll be something that's going to be appropriate to that area, but probably on a nicer end of the homes in that market. This site has a lot of constraints on it. Before I became involved with Mr. Lemon on this application, he had already approached the city about doing flag lot type of configuration for this. And if that had been permitted, there would have been more side yard setback between that access and the existing home. But when you start having to put a public street in, even a constrained public street as we're proposing, you have the tract on the north side that limits how far the lots can go that direction, and trying to keep some reasonable width to these lots, it makes for a very tight site. If the house had been original house had been built a little closer to the south property line, we probably wouldn't be here this evening discussing this situation. But it is where it's at, and we're asking for this variance. I note that this is only a 5-lot subdivision, one lot which has an existing home on it already. So really, we're talking about 4 new potential homes on this lot, of this parcel. And it's gonna have street frontage improvements on Hiram that includes new curb and sidewalk, has a new street. It has a water quality, stormwater detention facility. It all must be incorporated into the site. And yet it's got the constraint, it can't even use the entire site because of that environmental, the seasonal stream on the north side. So this property has a lot of constraints, and it must provide access for the parcels to the south to develop, which, as you saw with the correct lots that were shown on the assessor's map, that really there is some couple of parcels to the south that could be developed. And if, I don't know, I'm sure if you were provided our entire set of preliminary plans, application plans, but we did show a potential future street plan that showed a cul-de-sac. And that is what we show. It doesn't dictate exactly what the future will be there, but it's probably a reasonable concept of what would occur. And in terms of this street width, I believe that I heard that it was said that the street width curb to curb would be 20 feet, but I don't believe that's be correct. Even at 40 feet, we'll have 5-foot sidewalks on each side plus curbs. So that's basically taking 11 feet out of the 40 feet, which still leaves 29 feet. And I think there's a half foot. So I believe that the street width curb to curb will be 28 feet. In most jurisdictions that I'm dealing with, the 28-foot street does allow parking on one side. I don't know for sure if that's correct for Oregon City, but it's the same fire district that we see out in Clackamas County, and parking on one side is permitted on 28-foot streets. So I do believe that there may be parking permitted on one side, but I can't tell you that for sure absolutely at this point. But in any case, even lot 2, we saw the garage would be coming off the new street. There would be a garage probably towards the east end of the parcel, and maybe the front of the house would face, the front door might face towards Hiram. That's kind of the concept we see. There will be no driveways coming directly off of Hiram itself. So while the street is narrow, you can see the dashed lines up there on this plan that's on the screen now. That's approximately where the current edge of asphalt is in that vicinity. It may be a little bit further because that isn't actually showing the street itself, the current street edge, but it's in approximately that area.
The dash lines?
The dash lines, yeah.
That's not this, I thought it was the stream.
No, up at the top, the dash line stream. I'm talking along Hiram here.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, that's in about the approximate vicinity where it might even actually be a little bit further west there. I mean, Hiram is pretty narrow currently, so we are adding some width to it. And there will be, in that additional width, you'll have basically the effect of adding a parking facility, because there will be no bike lanes. I don't believe required for Hiram because it's such a low volume street. Mm-hmm. And so coming back finally to this setback issue, I realize 6.5 feet is it's closer to what you're used to, maybe what you're comfortable to, but we're seeing in all the jurisdictions now, the setbacks are being reduced as things get tighter and we're doing more infills. And in this case, I think, as Christina has noted, that this is a classic example of the trade-offs you're trying to work with and trying to do an infill. And we're request that the Planning Commission approve us for this setback in this case. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Tell you why I was concerned about fire trucks. I live in a new subdivision here in Oregon City, built in 2003, very wide streets. We've had 2 fires where the houses have burned down, one was next to me. Fire trucks came down, they couldn't get through because there was cars on either side, because people have kids and all that. All the trucks were lined up the street, and when one had to leave, there was no way they could back up. There was ambulances and all that, but again, because of cars on the street, on the side road there, the fire truck, the first one that arrived, parked there and got out, started putting water on it. The house burned to the ground, but the other ones couldn't get down to it, and we were in a new subdivision. And I thought it was a wide street, but once you see a fire truck and you see other ones coming along behind it with police cars and ambulances, one can block the whole rest of the place. And then for them to leave, they had to leave one at a time and pull out to go around, all the way around, so the rest of them could get out. That's why I always focus in on fire trucks, because that could be dangerous. I was out there with a hose in my house.
Yeah, and I understand that per the fire code, and this applies not to just only residential, but industrial, commercial sites as well, where we have long accesses. 20 feet is a standard unless the building's over 30 feet tall, and then they'll widen out to 26 on one side. But I've never seen a requirement for wider than 26 in any case.
So not the width, right, that, it was the turnaround and getting
Right.
more vehicles.
Right, and I understand, and you know, there's sometimes needs for enforcement of those rules. You know, you can put up no parking signs, you can paint the curbs or whatever. And I think we've all seen them ignored at times. But in this case, you know, we are trying to do this within what the requirements dictate.
Some of the other things I noticed, you said that they're not gonna take anything away from lot 5, it's gonna be here, and that's against, or not against, but it's different than what's in the report, and you also said the road is gonna be 28 curb to curb, and I'm seeing a lot of differences here, and I'm wondering where that's coming in.
Well, actually, I looked up to see if it dictated the rules. I looked at condition 22, I think is the one that's applicable in terms of where the fire turnaround is. And it doesn't say specifically lot 5, because I was curious if it says specifically lot 5. And I didn't see that. I saw condition 22 talks about a turnaround is required. And I also looked to see if the code or anything in here says specifically what the curb to curb width is. I've seen that sometimes. I couldn't find that here, but from previous experience, I'm pretty sure that the curb to curb width on a constrained street is 28, because on a full street section, it's 32 normally, and you have street side planters. Here we got curb tight sidewalks, so it's I believe gonna be 28 feet curb to curb.
So any comment on that, Laura or Christina? The fact that-
That's correct, and I apologize, I came into this a little late today. Mr. Sissel's correct. So it's 28 feet, which will probably be parking on one side of the street on the constraints area, and no parking.
And in that curve right there, is there enough room for a fire truck to turn around, or will they have to pull into the
Well,
driveway?
that's I think I was having a conversation with Development Services about Lot 5. When you get down to the Development Services review, that is where they ask the applicant to lay out the fire department's truck turnaround specs, and they figure out which is the best fit. And so the proposal for Lot 3 and 4 makes sense, but that level of detail is not normally in this condition of approval. That usually done through the development review. A condition that requires a fire truck turnaround is the trigger, and then the details of that get reviewed at the time of construction plan review for the street improvements. And that's where we loop in and get final approval with, our fire department.
Okay, and the last thing is, again, stepping back to the 6.5 versus the 15 feet for the site here on lot 1. How typical is that for us to have roofing that close to it, or is that something newer that's coming in that we're tightening the area? You said that a lot of homes are coming in less
I
than.
think this is really the request of, this is an existing condition. Do we allow this existing condition and work around the existing condition to come up with a subdivision that still meets our code criteria, albeit there was some modification request, but within the realm of a modification? Or is the applicant required to demolish the house in order to make sure that new construction meets today's setback requirements? So I think I'd rather look at this more as, this is a site-specific variance request.
Okay, thank you.
Well, eventually, economics are gonna force that existing house ultimately, eventually, to be raised
Yeah.
and a new house put on there.
So right now, the applicant is requesting a variance for
Yeah,
the
I
side yard
understand, I
setback
understand.
for the existing house.
Further questions for the applicant?
One quick one. We haven't touched on it, but it mentions at least one benchmark shall be located within the subdivision boundaries. What is a benchmark?
A benchmark is a survey datum, an elevation datum. And
Okay.
usually that's placed within a curb.
Like a little numbered marker, or?
Yeah, it's normally
Brass.
yeah, it's a brass one, right? You'll see them occasionally, if you look hard, on the newer subdivisions.
Okay.
Sometimes often they get destroyed, a curb gets replaced or something, but that's
And
usually.
the purposes for location, or?
The purpose is for creating a elevation network through the city. At one time, back in, I want to say the late 90s, the city paid a consultant to go out and put markers all throughout the city. And over time, many of those have been lost. So now they're putting brass discs, I believe is what they're putting out there, to reestablish a benchmark system, elevation system for the city.
Okay, thank you.
And I just
Anything
have
else?
one thing for the planning commission. If the planning commission is concerned about redevelopment of the existing house on lot one, you can also do a condition that if it redevelops, the new house doesn't get the reduced setback.
That'd be good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any representatives from a recognized neighborhood association? Okay, public comments, 3 minutes each, and I have one card from Paulette Merrill.
Am I on? I'm Paulette Merrill. I live at 16390 Hiram Avenue, which is directly to the south of this proposal. And I want to compliment anybody that drove down our street, because you notice that on the Hiram end, that you turn off of Holcomb, very constrained. The houses are very close to the street. When sidewalks come through, those people will have practically no yard. Clear up at the other end, close to the park, same condition. And thank you, Mr. Guile, for noticing that every single new house that's gone in doesn't match the character of the neighborhood. And they're new houses. Of course, you're gonna put in a new house, you want a new house. But the houses that were originally in Park Place were built a long time ago. So anyway, I have two issues or concerns. One is the water and one is the traffic. Every house that's gone in has created and used their designated trips per day. I used to be on the planning commission, so I used to know how many trips every house would generate, every new house. These houses are generating their maximum number of trips. Our street is not the street that I moved into. And I would, the natural stream, it might be called an intermittent stream, but I have never seen it without water flowing in it. There might not be fish, but there's other sorts of stuff in that waterway. It has never not flowed. That's just an aside. And I think that's what I want to say. There's a lot of things that I really cannot complain about when I saw this. I'm so pleased that they didn't ask for a variance to go down to our low. So I can't complain about that. I like the stormwater facility. I'm concerned about stormwater on my property because we have what we call standing water season, and we're in standing water season on my side yard closest to this property. That's just the way it is. And I don't want to see stormwater from Lot 5 flowing onto my property the way the houses above me have water flowing down on my property. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? Wow, my eyes are failing me tonight. Opportunity for rebuttal from the applicant.
Not so much rebuttal, it's just clarification and, the intent for this subdivision and the stormwater facilities, it would take all the water basically from this development and direct it towards the stormwater facility, which then be directed out towards Hiram and the storm system that goes downstream from there. No water, no stormwater is gonna be directed to the south or to the east of this site. So I just wish to make that clear if there was some questions in the commissioner's mind.
That's it?
That's it.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, we'll close the public hearing. And discussion, deliberation from the commission.
Okay, I guess I've spoken the most. I was just thinking, Holcomb Boulevard, living there, I know our neighborhood association spent a lot of time, and there were so many homes built along the original Oregon Trail, that then they tried to protect it, and there are signs there. She brought up an idea, I mean, it's too bad, and something we can't do, we can't tell them to make those homes more historical. That is the end of the Oregon Trail as it comes down right around in the Hiram area, probably named after a settler, actually. But I can see, as I said earlier, the homes that are newer stick out like sore thumbs, but I don't think we have any historical significance to build historically significant homes that match that. So that would be a rough one to match those up. I feel for, I know Hiram is very narrow, and I see a great idea here, as Bob said, these lots, a lot of open area there, but there's not a lot we can do. If we're gonna improve the development in some of these infills, we can't tell them they have to build historically small homes like the other homes on Hiram. My main concern is how narrow that Hiram is just to get to this spot that's gonna be widened.
I feel that this is an opportunity to put our money where our mouth is on getting some more home sites and adding to some alternate home styles and improve a vacant area. And I don't think that the trade-off is that monumental. I think the city gains the advantage here. As for the traffic, that's an ongoing battle. Those traffic avenues are eventually going to be widened and improved. It's a matter of time. And I hate to admit it, in the 20 years I've been doing this, those streets aren't gonna get improved until the problem gets so bad, that we have no choice other than to improve our street system. And it's just a matter of money. We just don't have the resources to do it. So what we do is we infill in the meantime to catch up with our housing stock. And I'm going to support this project. I think it'd be an advantage to the city. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
I believe we haven't talked a lot about the code and the details and all of that because some of it comes later during the development cycle. There's some constraints with this type of property, but the code allows certain variations and mixes and matches and a balance to get a property that is an improvement from what it is today, in that there's some large land area here that you know, the water that comes down goes where it goes. It improves that, and as Paulette mentioned, as a local neighbor, she had her issues, and I heard those, but you did say that there's some pluses and some minuses, and if we were in a perfect world, we could probably throw more money at it and do a better job. But I think for what we need today and what you're offering here is a viable product.
Commissioner Stoll, any comment?
Yeah, I'm inclined to approve this, just simply for the fact that we're preserving an existing house for financial and environmental reasons. We're not doing away with something that already exists to build something that would serve the same function.
Thank you. Commissioner Gao, you more to add?
I have one other question before I say anything. Where does the pond access the stormwater? That doesn't go to the stream, does it? That goes to a separate pipe, right? Okay, right. Again, I'm gonna kind of repeat a little bit of what I said. I understand her concern. I wouldn't want to be in that area with that narrow street, but I understand the need for the property. And my concern always is the existing neighborhoods, whether it's Park Place, South End, Beaver Creek, existing neighborhoods and how it's gonna impact them. So traffic is an issue that was brought up, but until, as Bob pointed out, we improve the roads, which I'm not sure how they could do on Hiram, because it's, she's right, the homes come right up to the road, kind of like Jackie's on Holcomb Boulevard. So, as much as I'm having a difficult time with this, I will probably go ahead and approve it, because I can see that there's a lot there that could be used for more homes.
Commissioner Schlangenhoff.
Well, obviously, they're balancing a lot here. There's a lot to consider in a small space. They've done their best to preserve the small waterway there. Preserving the small house as probably a modest entry-level home for a family, which I can understand. If you move it, turn it, you spend another $40,000 on it, that kind of puts a lot of people out of the market for that house. So I'm not a big fan of the setback, but I understand the purpose of it. And we're here to decide if this whole thing is a legal use of land, and I feel it is. That's about as far as I feel we should, be allowed to judge it, so I will support it.
Commissioner Gage.
I do support this. I think it's a great project. I think we really need the infill, so I'm for it.
Just a couple of things. Commissioner Gao, you mentioned the neighborhood, and we appreciate you being here, Ms. Merrill. I did look to see if there were, and I'm always plan to do this, look to see if there were comments from the neighborhood association, and there weren't. And then I looked at the list of people who were at the public hearing, a public meeting, that the applicant held, and several key players in the Park Place Neighborhood Association. And I believe your land, is Bob LaSalle still the land use chair?
I don't remember this coming before us. I don't remember seeing this.
Well, they had the roster from, the sign-in sheet from the public meeting was attached, and Bob LaSalle was there. Lisa Novak was there. I don't recall some of the other names, but, and so that the neighborhood association, it appears, didn't have serious objections, so I do take that into account. I guess the only thing I would say is I would like to see the condition placed on lot 1 that if that lot is redeveloped, that our standard setbacks would apply, because even if they decide to tear down the house or build a garage or whatever, because there's plenty of room on that lot to do that. But with that added condition, I'd be in favor of it as well. So any further discussion? Do we have a motion?
Actually, and so you could include that additional condition in the motion, that'd be helpful.
Okay.
I'll move to approve GLUA 18-00038 with the added condition that the reduced setback only apply to the existing house on the property.
That's it.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Stoll, second by Commissioner Mahoney. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Mahoney?
Aye.
Commissioner Gao?
Oh, you did them out of order this time. Threw me off.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Schlangenhofer?
Aye.
Commissioner Gage?
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll?
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you very much. We will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is discussion of City Commission requests for additional Planning Commission review of certain code amendments. I assume, Ms. Turway, this is, oh, Pete, okay, Mr. Walter.
One moment.
I'm afraid to touch this, Michael.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. Good evening, Commissioners. So this evening, we're going to be discussing 4 items that were part of a set of issues that have been discussed with the City Commission and prioritized for further review and clarification from the Planning Commission. This is part of file LEG 18-0001, which is the Development Code Amendments, including equitable housing. What we're going to be discussing tonight was reviewed by the Planning Commission previously in 2018. And we had a recommendation for approval of various code amendments, same packet of amendments that are before the City Commission right now. And the Planning Commission initially ruled on those in November, I believe, of 2018. So the 4 topics that we were going to go back over tonight are listed here. They include the discussion about the owner occupancy requirement for accessory dwelling units and how that relates to a short-term rental policy. We're going to discuss that one first because it has ramifications for further public process beyond the current process, and I'll talk about that. The other 3 items, 2, 3, and 4, we can potentially get direction on tonight if we have a comprehensive discussion. Those include discussion about the mixed-use downtown district height limit, whether or not to prohibit 3 to 4 plexes in the Kenema Historic Commercial District along 99E, and a discussion about the current mailed notice area of 300 feet. So the first item we're talking about is accessory dwelling units. So in your packet, we put together a memorandum, and we talked about the way we laid it out was the general background, then we talked about how the project advisory team recommended on it, how the Planning Commission initially recommended on it, and then some of the issues. So what I'm providing you here is the basic background. So currently, the code requires that if you have an accessory dwelling unit on your property, which you're allowed to do in any single-family zone, that you live in that accessory dwelling or your main unit, your home, for at least 7 months out of the year, and at no time receive rent for the owner-occupied unit. No other residential use requires owner occupancy, so if you compare this requirement to any other use, you won't find it. There may be language coming from the state about this, but that's neither here nor there at this point. This is a local code that we need to be thinking about. So there was a lot of testimony during the hearing process about the impact potentially of short-term rentals. Right now, if you want to do a short-term rental in Oregon City, whether it's your house or your accessory dwelling unit, you need to get, and you're in a residential zone, you have to get a conditional use permit from the Planning Commission. And that process has a fee associated with it, approximately close to $5,000, $4,800, something like that. That's a one-time review fee that covers the cost of the Planning Commission and review and the staff report and all that. And once there's a decision on that conditional use, that runs with the land. So related to this concern about the process, yeah, it's a public hearing, there's a fee, it takes some time to get through it, there's no guarantee that you will be approved, and it is a quasi-judicial decision from the Planning Commission. So there was a desire expressed for a less onerous process, and also a discussion about what the potential impacts of short-term rentals are from a permitting point of view. So if the city were to adopt a short-term rental policy, also known as a vacation rental policy in some jurisdictions, there really needs to be a robust public discussion about that, with input from everybody involved, renters, owners, residents, the industry itself. We guesstimate that this process could take 4 to 6 months, and it would require developing code and policies based on input from Oregon City residents and based on what other cities have done, adoption of a fee, a discussion about enforcement, and all those sorts of things. The Planning Commission comments and recommendation were that the owner occupancy requirement should be removed. There was concern about whether you remove it now and then you have a problem, whether that results in an unforeseen consequence down the line that you didn't anticipate. And therefore, if you remove the owner occupancy in the future and it's a hindrance to ADUs, then that's easier than to require owner occupancy once the requirement's been removed. Also, we're hearing concerns that properties would not be well maintained. There are statements about general livability of the neighborhood if impacted by short-term rentals, particularly if the owner doesn't live on site. So if you have an absentee landowner. And those livability concerns need to be, discussed and quantified and made more specific, I think, because there's a difference between land use concerns such as parking and nuisance concerns like noise and that sort of thing. And so the general recommendation from the Planning Commission is that owner occupancy requirement should be removed since it's not required for any other use, notwithstanding the discussion about short-term rental concerns. So some of the considerations that staff have thought about initially is what is the purpose of pursuing a short-term rental policy? What is the problem we're trying to solve? Is it important to have that policy in place prior to removing the owner occupancy requirement of ADUs, for ADUs? And if so, what aspects of it do we want to address? Do we want a simpler process? Do we want to adopt clear and objective standards and a permit procedure that is largely administrative in scope as opposed to a land use decision? And what types of livability impacts are we concerned about, and are we willing to adopt standards to mitigate those? There are several municipalities that have adopted either one permit process or 2 permit types for these types of things, and we can look at all of that. And particularly important, I think, in the long term is what is the impact of short-term rentals on the long-term rental market, and are those units being taken off the market for long-term residents if they are being used as short-term rentals? And that was part of the equitable housing project discussion as well. And you all may have other concerns about that too. Any other ideas and considerations you think we should pursue? We'd like to hear those. So that's the first item, and I'm
Could you quickly flip back to the first slide before this one?
yeah, okay. Yeah.
So I have a question on that first statement. Planning Commission originally recommended that the owner occupancy requirement be removed. Does that mean that they went back and then wanted it later, or was their final recommendation was no owner occupancy requirement?
Well, we had testimony from the Planning Commission at the City Commission level to clarify that they did intend for this owner occupancy requirement to be removed. It did go back and forth during the hearing process, but ultimately that's what we heard from the Planning Commission.
Okay. Because of the fact that 4 of us are late to the party on this.
Sure.
And I want to thank former Commissioners Maybe and McGriff for being here. Would either or both of you like to come up and say anything on this issue?
Because I'm trying to remember what we all discussed.
Yeah, I know this is one that went.
There are 3 people sitting there that also know about this.
I understand that, and they'll get their chance, but I want to make sure.
Don't leave us hanging.
I want to make sure that you get your chance.
Would
as
you
well.
go back
And
one other screen?
We're here to participate with you, that's what we were asking of you.
did the overall short-term rental policy or not come up before? Or is
Yes.
that some,
Yes.
okay, but you didn't make, maybe you could address whether or not you made a recommendation on that also. And we'll hear from the other,
We
the three
basically-
continuing commissioners also.
We basically said that we definitely, yeah, well, he already introduced me. Denise McGriff, Oregon City.
I could have been Denise.
I'd like her to be me.
You do
Anyway,
too
my
much
name is
yoga.
Damon Mabey and I live in Oregon City. We did talk about it. I am very aware that the non-complying short-term vacation rentals that exist in my neighborhood are taking rental properties off the market. And there's a rotating cast of people that are coming and going, and they may be nice people, I'm not judging them, but coming and going. There's some parking issues in parts of the neighborhood because of it. And there are people who are constantly looking for rentals in our neighborhood. And if they keep getting utilized by short-term rentals, it's gonna be really tough. I mean, it is tough now just for people to find a place to live. And, you know, you can go online and look at any number of them because they're all advertising. And if they show you a picture, for those of us who lived here long enough, you can figure out where it is, you know where it is. So I think there's definitely was a concern about those types of occupancies being taken off the market due to the fact that everywhere in the Portland metro area, we have an issue with rental properties not being available, because not everybody's ready to jump into a house. You need to find a place to live first, and then you figure out if you can actually afford to do that. But yeah, we talked about it quite a bit, but given the work program and the workload of the staff, that just wasn't a super high priority at the time. I mean, it really isn't, but, you know, eventually, what I worry about is that some of this is gonna come to a head, somebody's gonna file a complaint, and here we are, you know, and you just hate to see that happen.
Yeah. I'm the real David, maybe, tell the truth.
FID.
Anyway, yeah, in fact, your second bullet is exactly the point I continued to make when we were discussing the whole issue is, you know, the probably the biggest thing that came up that well, yeah, they came up during the discussion that kind of made me pull back from saying, you know, owner occupancy or else, was that no place else requires it. I mean, my neighbor can just rent out his property without, you know, and in fact, at one point, my neighbor had 4 residences because it was a halfway house for head trauma. So the garage was subdivided into 2, the house was subdivided into 2, and then the caretaker lived there. So there was 5 separate residences next door to me. You know, they were permitted, so, or at least it was permitted with the state. You know, you know, that swayed me a little bit. It's like, well, you know, just my neighbor can just rent his house out and nothing's gonna stop him, and exactly the same problems, you know, that could be happening. And then kind of the subtle argument that was made is these short-term occupancies are happening already. The Airbnbs, the VRBO, whatever, they're happening already. Whether or not you have an ADU in your property, or, you know, whether it's a basement or a remodeled garage or whatever, isn't gonna change that. And, you know, so if somebody's inclined to do that, that's how they're going to handle their property. If they're not inclined to have rotating customers and they want steady, you know, people, they will rent to a steady, you know, long-term rental. And then another comment that somebody made to me after I was off the commission was that what tends to happen is people build these for the rotating short-term market, then they get tired of it, and then they want somebody steady. So what it kind of does is the short-term market generates the quantity that eventually shifts from short-term to long-term. Because these aren't competing with hotels to a large extent. Conventions aren't gonna book a neighborhood. So, we've got laws in place for nuisances and all that. What we need to do is come up with a short-term rental policy that has a clear path and it has clear responsibilities. The biggest, what we need to do is capture that market because some people who are doing short-term rentals said, we have no problem paying the hotel tax, but we have a problem paying $5,000 just to get on the rolls for the hotel tax. That wasn't necessarily an issue for me because I did an Airbnb. 1 week was $750. 6 months, you've paid your $5,000 back. So the next, however many generations you're doing it, it's all profit. But still having a clean, not taking 6 months. It should be something, maybe it's staff level, maybe it's a quick, the staff does all the work and it still is a type 3 approval, but it doesn't need the huge, brouhaha about it. And that's what you're gonna be working on, and I'll be cued in on that, but,
I think there needs to be some sort of a minimal notification.
yeah.
People,
Yeah, and you just don't want suddenly 5 neighbors to show up. But,
On screen, Mike?
Pardon?
Can you go back one screen while they're up here?
I don't, this one?
Right here, I was gonna ask both of you, did we discuss this, having a, residents and owners and renters and everybody coming in and having get some input from all of them? Did we discuss that?
The plan,
only that it was something that needed to happen.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Made
a
any
discussion,
decision.
it was just,
we didn't get specific about it, we just said that there needs to be a broad base of input.
That's what I agree with.
Because so far, what we heard was, well, I wanna do this, and, blah, 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 blah. We didn't hear from
The neighbor to
people.
that.
Yes,
Yeah.
we didn't hear from the neighbors, or we didn't hear from, and I, matter of fact, happened to be at a public hearing with the city of Portland, and I don't know why the VRBO thing was on the agenda, but I was there for something else, and so I had to sit there for an hour and listen to some of the conversation by the industry, and of course, it was all like, oh, this is totally not a problem, yada, and you've read the stories in the newspaper, so I was a little, well, yeah, it was all one-sided. So I know there's the other side of the story, and I think the staff would be very open to getting input from all aspects, as opposed to just having industry people come in and saying, hey, this is the greatest thing since sliced toast, look at all the money you're gonna make. Well, it's not always about the fee, or the hotel motel tax.
I had a question from what happened at the commission meeting, and Laura, maybe you have a little more background. I don't see that the two are connected.
I don't either.
Deciding on owner occupancy of the ADU and having a short-term rental policy. I got the impression from listening to the commission that they wanted to address those two things together.
correct.
Personally, I don't have a problem with going with the previous planning commission's recommendation on owner occupancy, that there not be an owner occupancy requirement on ADUs. But no way am I gonna try to go down the road of a short-term rental policy without that whole public process from
Right, I
all those
agree.
different
They put it
stakeholders.
together,
I
Laura.
agree.
Yes, it was, I believe, the April 3rd
Yeah, 'cause
meeting
never-
where we
It was never
got,
together in planning commission at all.
Right.
it was not together.
Right.
In fact, the planning commission did a separate memorandum with a request for other things the city commission should consider outside this process, and it included the short-term rental policy packaged up in that. The other thing I just wanted to clarify, though, is the confusion about what the planning commission's recommendation is, because if you look at the red lines, it does retain the owner occupancy, which was what came out of the planning commission, and then we had the verbal testimony before the city commission by a majority of the planning commissioners to remove the owner occupancy.
yeah, we bounced back and forth. I believe that we ended with no owner occupancy. Laura went back and looked at the record, came down with owner occupancy. That's why we went to the commission and said specifically, you know, well, it didn't say specifically, but the intent was, if there is any question, the answer from the commission was no owner occupancy.
Didn't we discuss, Damon?
Is that's your, you two gentlemen, that's your recommendation, or your recollection as well?
Yeah, it was
We've
Verg's
been in
recommendation.
both positions, and it's
Right.
just a matter of when you turn the calendar and say, oh, this is the answer, and you turn the calendar next time, and we might,
You made the
In
motion,
between
as a
here.
matter of fact, you made the motion to remove the owner occupancy, and then we all decided at the very last minute, yeah, let's just get rid of it. That's, because I remember,
Yeah,
I wrote in my
so
notes.
they've done a very good job between the two of them, relating what we went through.
Right. And that's why we wanted them here.
I don't disagree with any of it, because my mind is far shorter than their mind, so I forgot about that.
No, we said we take it
Commissioner
out.
Guile, is that your recollection of?
I'm not even sure if I'd vote on that, because I would have voted no. I want owner occupancy, because I'm afraid that people from out of state are gonna come
It
up
was
and
like
buy
a
all these
5-2
homes.
or
Yeah, it was
4-3.
like, yeah, it was fine.
Because I said that these people are gonna come from out of state because they have more money than we do here in Oregon. They're gonna start buying these homes. I've seen it in Trailview, my neighborhood, where some of the homes are now being rented out. And they're from out of state people who are buying these up because they're cheaper with their money from, I'm not saying in California, it's everybody all around the United States can buy homes here, just rent them out to everybody. And I just don't like that picture.
But that's the short-term rental question and
Oh,
not the
sorry.
ADU, and not the ADU question.
So we
Well,
did,
that's to be tied.
we
Well,
did
they're
go
tied
back and
together.
watch the
Yes.
video,
Yeah.
and staff believes that but it doesn't even matter. But I mean, I think moving forward, we have the start of a project. So we got the recommendation from Planning Commission to do this separate project. We went to the City Commission, we talked about it at the retreat in February. And staff had suggested that we wait till after the comp plan. So we had some staff capacity to address it, and that was fine at the time. And now we're seeing some direction to kind of work on it and pair it with and sort of put these two things together and figure out how they'll work or not. And so Pete's starting to build out what a work plan would look like, what a project would look like, but we'll have to fit it in when we have staff time. So at the moment, it's more of an FYI. The City Commission did request a work session with the Planning Commission. Oh, no, that was for something else. Take that back. So there is be a project more. We do intend to go back to City Commission, make sure they're clear on what our project scope is, just to make sure that we're all on the same page with how we achieve the goal of going through this.
So if we reach out to the community, is that our role of the planning, or is that the city commission that has meetings with the public regarding these?
So for right now, you don't have to do anything. We're trying to figure out when we address the project and what the scope of that project will look like. And then when we come up with that project scope, we'll let you know. But as ambassadors to the city, if we have any long-term projects and where we're looking for public input, we would always hope that you would help get people involved.
Of course.
So
Well, what I wanna know is, where is it written that land use and ownership of property is combined?
This is the only place in where we regulate ownership
I
as
mean,
ADUs.
You just can't, it's un-American.
This is these conversations of all these aspects of
It's not a constitutional question, though.
Tom, you're just inviting a swarm to come down on your head. Saying,
fine.
you cannot keep those damn Californians
It's not
out of
just
work.
Californians, it's
I'm one of them.
Hurricane Alley, it's Tornado Alley, all
So
those.
Mike, would you
I always say it's not
suggest that
California, it's all over.
I advocate on behalf of separating the two projects? Because to me, they really don't go together.
I agree.
And I would rather see.
Okay. Yeah,
I would rather
I'm
see
seeing a lot of nodding of
the short-term
heads.
rental issue be separated on its
Yes,
own and the
absolutely.
ADU issue. So when we have this come back to the city commission, I will say, look,
The planning commission,
this is
Wants
what,
them.
we think that this is what we ought to do, and they don't commingle the two of
The
them.
old
Right.
commission and the new commission.
right, and the
concur
old commission and
that.
the new commission agree that there should not
Yes.
be an owner occupancy requirement on ADUs.
Right, but they should, the two issues of short-term rental and ADU should not be commingled.
And they're
There should not
separate.
be any
Right.
owner occupancy requirement on any residential piece of property.
or
Well, there- it-
commercial
Well, there
piece
isn't,
of property.
there isn't currently. This would be the first one if we did
Okay,
it,
then
and we're saying, no, we
don't
shouldn't.
include that in.
Well, this is how it is now, is that correct? There isn't a residency
Correct.
requirement.
Yeah,
Okay.
so.
So we're looking to
It's
remove that.
recommended, it isn't by
Okay.
ordinance.
Okay.
So
Okay,
you're going to
thank you.
advocate
That was very helpful.
that they are separate, two separate items,
Right,
A recommend.
and they should be
And-
separated
and the
and dealt with
recommendation-
Yes.
individually.
and the recommendation is no
Right.
owner occupancy
Okay,
ADUs.
I got it.
Sell my
Okay.
home and start buying
Thank
lots of
you
homes.
very much.
Thank you for the clarification. Are there any other things that we initially want to talk about this, or can we move on?
I think we can
Move
move
on to the
on.
next one.
Okay.
You want us to stay up here?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
I got my list. She has something
Pete, can I make a
to say about
suggestion?
one of them.
Yeah.
Can we jump to the Kanema district? Because I
Sure.
believe that's
That's what
what Ms.
Pat's
Webb
here.
is interested in, and she
Yeah.
probably doesn't need to hear us talk about building heights.
Hey, can I take my spot? Does you have the spot? Yes, this is, okay. So take my
First
spot.
off, Pete, you're going to make a presentation first, right?
Briefly.
Okay.
Background on this, the city commission requested further review. This is the area, look, I'm going to show you a map. Currently, we define multifamily as 3 or more units on one property. So, but we're going to be breaking out 3 to 4 units as a separate unit type. So the discussion with respect to how these are appropriate land uses is really one issue, and whether or not they, and how they look as far as exterior compatibility is really, in staff's point of view, a separate issue, but for some people, they are entwined. We acknowledge that. And then the Historic Review Board, irrespective of what we decide, the Historic Review Board will review for compatibility with the Historic Review Board guidelines for new construction, any new construction in this district, and any addition to an existing building of over 30% also goes through the Historic Review Board property. So this is an aerial photograph with the Historic Commercial District superimposed on the top of it. And this is the question. And with that, we can kick off.
Ms. Webb, would you please reintroduce yourself for the record?
I'm Patty Webb. I live in Kanema, specifically 310 3rd Avenue. I'm also chair of Friends of Kanema. Paul Edgar and Howard Post and I all conferred on this earlier and are all in agreement that 3 and 4 plexes in Kanema go against everything that it should stand for. It is not something that would fit into the historic codes or guidelines. It does not fit into the topography of the properties there. There are very few properties left for infill. It would block the view from anyone above it because Kanema is very steep. There's not any place there that you can put up a 3 or 4 plex vertically that is not going to block someone's view historically, and that's not something that should be done there. My property's already been devalued by some inappropriate decisions, and I hate to see it further continue in Kanema. Kanema has so few lots left that anything that's done there is going to affect the view of it. If you want to get a good idea of it, go across the river in West Lynn and take a look at Kanema and what's been done there in the last 10 years, and it decidedly detracts from the neighborhood. And I really don't see why that should be a wish that anybody has to wish upon Kanema or the people that live there.
Thank you. So
One-
I got a couple of questions to make sure that I understand. First off, we're only talking about this zone, not the rest of Kanema. Currently,
Which zone do you mean?
the highlighted,
The commercial
The
across
commercial.
Third?
this area on both sides of McLaughlin here, with, and all these properties look like they're touch McLaughlin except maybe one over here. Anyway, so currently in this district, are 3 and 4 plexes allowed?
Yes, I think the problem is that when we say 3 and 4-plex, we're picturing a building look. And what we really mean is 3 or 4 units on one site. 3 or 4 units on one site is allowed, because right now multifamily is allowed. So now in the historic corridor, it allows single-family detached, it allows multifamily, it allows a variety of residential uses. How those uses look then get filtered through HRB. In this code amendment, the 3 and 4 plexes were taken out of permitted uses in historic corridor, so you could still have the single family, and you could still have multifamily now being defined as 5 and above, but for some reason, the 3 and 4 units on one lot got taken out.
That's just
Because
the historic.
because of the concern that it would look inappropriate in Kenema, and so we wanted to try and tease out the difference between the use of a property and the look of a property. It'll still be subject to HRB review.
I have a question on that though, that I find that very confusing, how a multi-family dwelling differs from a 3 to 4 unit. I don't understand how that differs from an apartment complex. And I think that the apartment complexes at each end of our neighborhood have caused no end of problems. Noise, violence, a lot of unspayed cats, I'm talking hundreds. They have no interest in our neighborhood. A few have had to be removed because they've caused so much damage to our neighborhood coming home in states of destruction. It's had a detrimental effect on our neighborhood. I don't think they should have been put there to begin with, and I don't think it's fair to use them as a comp for what you do in the future, because like I've said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Those 2 apartment complexes are inappropriate for Kenema. They've already done enough damage. I don't understand why you would want to continue that with so little left.
Commissioner Johnson?
Let her finish. Let her finish.
That's it. That's
Okay.
I've heard the comment that there's very few lots left in this defined
Buildable.
area.
buildable
Is there a number or approximate number or?
I
and-
could
and
find
what I-
out for you, but the problem is that when I moved to the neighborhood, I actually literally checked into the situation and was told that lots were unbuildable by code. Well, since I've lived there, that has changed.
Yeah.
And they've allowed people to violate the codes, and go around them, circumvent them to get these projects done. And I think that's a big betrayal to the people that live there and are charged with maintaining the area themselves. It's a double standard for what they have to maintain and what is being done to it.
A follow-up
Mr. Reed?
question to that is really, is the number insignificant enough that it's not worth our effort to try and wrestle this thing?
No,
and
it's not.
you
Because
know,
Kenema
or
has,
if it's very small, then we can
Any
make
of
a
these could-
decision,
they
but
could-
it will have no effect.
But any of these could come forward for redevelopment proposals.
True, that's what I'm looking to see, what is the potential?
Well,
so it's a lost cause because there's so few lots left, we might as well just.
And what assurance do you feel you may have through the Historic Review Board? They would be reviewing anything proposed in this area. And let's say that may be the only way to get it there and not have the planning commission get involved at all.
I would like to see them adhere to the historic codes and guidelines and use that as a base. I would like to see them stop giving permission to violate. I'd like to see them stop saying things like, sure, it's a violation, but it's in the back or the side, so nobody that matters sees it. I'd like to stop being treated like we don't matter and we don't care, because those codes were put into place for a reason. We've also made agreements under Measure 1 to uphold those. We've made a promise to SHPO, and we've made a promise to the National Registry that registered our neighborhood and our homes. This violates that
Yeah,
for the sake of commercialism.
I'm not suggesting that we would make a decision here, but somebody should look at that and say, it's an opportunity, it may be a hindrance to the neighborhood.
Our
And
historic
is it
codes are not a
large enough that
hindrance.
it's worth our effort to do this, or do we just do something else with it and try to keep it as?
I'm sorry, I find that contrary to everything that the historic areas of Oregon City are supposed to represent.
Commissioner Guile, any thoughts on how the recommendation came to be where it is, or?
Well, if I can chime
Yeah,
in.
Thank you,
please, yeah.
Damon.
I said no 3/4s for 3 reasons. One, It's a historic district. It's a national historic district. Every little cut can endanger that statement. So maybe the 2 or 3 infills don't do it, but then the cottage complex does. You know, I mean, you want to stay as far away from that danger zone as possible. Second, it's a commercial district. Why would you build any sort of residential in a commercial district? So right off the bat, the district says 3 4-plexes don't belong. Okay? And third, there aren't any there now. There have never been any in the 175-year history of the site. So why would we let them happen now? You know, the closest version to a 3 or 4-plex that's ever been there is the old mansions subdivided into boarding houses. That's still a single-family residence. So, you know, there aren't any in that whole zone. There have never been any in that whole zone. So just leave the door closed. You know?
Damon, would you say that Kenema ought to be just frankly exempt from the equitable housing study?
I'm saying that the historic codes do exempt it.
Well, I mean, if it's a historic area, it's a historic area.
Yes,
And so we're not going to invite or encourage change.
it's already there. There's already been an ADU put in with no restrictions. There's already a
In this
4-plex that
district?
started out as a 9-plex.
No, it's in Kenema.
In Kenema.
Okay,
Not
but
in
we're
the
talking,
historic district.
Yeah.
let's try to stay focused on this district, or
And-
we're gonna be way in the weeds otherwise.
And yes, I would say that Kenema particularly, and the McLaughlin Conservation Area, need to be very carefully looked at and preserved. And if that means that they're not part of affordable housing, I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I think that you need to look at, you know, what is the purpose of it? And does that purpose outweigh the greater purpose of the zone? And I don't see how, you know, if there was a history of there being boarding houses, you know, or, you know, whatever in this area, and you're taking it back to the history, and in the same time getting the benefit of affordable housing, well, that's one thing, but there is no history of these.
Is
And
that area on the historical registry?
It's in the National Historic Registry
Well, then
as
what
a
are we doing
district and
screwing with it?
individual homes.
Right.
You tell me, why is it so important
well,
to
that's-
have them there?
Well, and that's why I wanted it pulled off. It should never have been in there in the first place, in my opinion.
Well, then what this planning commission ought to go on record and say what we mean
Can I,
and just solve this problem.
We're
can I
considering.
clarify the difference between the historic district is intended to review the exterior of buildings, not the use within. We're talking about a use within the building. Right now, I can read the statement for the purpose for historic corridor if you want to as well. But right now, the historic commercial district allows single-family detached, duplexes, and multifamily, which is 3 or more. So it allows all types of residential units. And the proposed amendments that is now before the city commission, it allows single-family detached, duplexes, it added internal conversions, and then also retained multifamily, but it took out 3 and 4 plexes. So it still allows the spectrum of residential, it just took out 3 and 4 plexes. And again, that's the use within a building. The exterior of the building still is subject to review by historic review board.
So it allows, the proposed code allows 1, 2, and 5 and above, but not 3 and 4?
Yes, that's correct.
But Laura,
Find
given
another-
the history of this zone, what has left the city to think that we ought to include these things in it? I mean, the history of the zone speaks for itself. It's a historic zone. It's on the National Registry. Why allow any land use changes that would counter that purpose? I don't understand.
If you didn't want to make a change, you would add 3 and 4 plexes back because they're currently allowed today. 3 and 4 units on one lot are allowed today. What those buildings look like goes through our design guidelines and through a separate historic review board review. We did hear testimony with concerns about how well historic review board review is working, and that's a slightly separate topic, but the issue of 3 and 4 units on one property is allowed today. The proposed amendment for the city commission removes it, but retains all other amounts of housing.
And the reason this came up is, as part of the equitable housing package, we redefined 3 and 4 plexes as something different than multifamily.
That's
So
correct.
that now, even though multifamily is allowed in this district, that would now also allow 3 and 4 plexes unless we say, no, they're not.
That's correct. And 3 and 4 plexes, we have specific design standards for what those have to look like. It's up to the applicant to meet both codes, to meet requirements for 3 and 4 plexes and to meet requirements for historic review board and any other environmental overlays there may be.
Well, and the reason why we didn't push to get the whole multifamily question out, because first off, there are some duplexes and single family already in there, so they exist, is that we found, or at least I found, that it would be very difficult to build a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plex and meet the historic codes. So it was kind of a, because part of the problem is, as Denise just pointed out, when we got these codes, we got all uses permitted in the MUC one code plus this, and this. So we had to have that list, and then we had to have this list. And going back and forth, it's like, how many line out crossovers are we gonna do? 3 and 4 plexes were what I saw as the border. You could conceivably do them and make them look like a saloon. Yay, I live in the 2nd floor of a saloon, or the 4th story of a buggy factory, but, it's just, by the time you get to 5, 6 units, you're really gonna have a tough time making a case in front of the historic review board for this, so.
Thank you.
What do we have
Commissioner-
for height restrictions in this area? Because I've heard people that are up at hillside a little bit and got a view, whatever reason they bought it, they like the view.
35 feet.
Now you put a 45-foot fourplex up here.
That's more
And it's a
downtown.
skinny, narrow house.
different
There
front
goes the
yard.
view for uphill.
It's 35 feet or 3 stories, whichever is less, and there were no changes proposed to that in this code amendment. We also don't have any view corridors in the city either.
Yeah, we do need to get some, but I mean, you look at Kenema and everything is stepped down.
Yeah.
Basically because of topography, but I think the reason that we had a concern is that you look at the definition of what the historic commercial district, so it's designed for limited use and allowed uses are to facilitate the reuse and preservation of existing buildings. It does talk about constructing architecturally compatible structures, but that's a whole different thing. I'm talking more about the land uses, and I think when I think of a historic commercial district, I don't think of 3 and 4 plexes, or even multiple family dwellings, because if you look at how that district was designed, guess what's right in the middle of it? A major corridor, which they don't follow the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. I hope you all do, because that's nicer for Kenema if you drive 40
A
through there.
highway goes through it.
A highway, a river runs through it, so to speak. And I guess we just didn't see, what I'm concerned about is the loss of structures, because somebody could come in and buy 616 McLaughlin Boulevard and decide they want to put up a 3 and 4 plex. So how does that help reinforce the historic district? This is the only National Register district we have in Oregon City, and I think anything that we can do to facilitate adaptive reuse and discourage tear downs is to the benefit of our community, because Oregon City, as I said, I'm saying it, I like history, but Oregon City is all about history. We have something here that nobody else has in the entire state and the nation. We have one little corner of the market that we need to figure out how to enhance. And my concern is that type of a land use could lead to tear downs. I just don't want to see that, and particularly in Kenema.
Just one more thing on the demolition is that historic review board does have to authorize demolition, and we have demolition denial as well.
if you do now. which
Yeah, I
is
just
nice.
wanted to clarify, since we're talking about that definition.
Other comments?
So that's pretty much it. I mean, it was, we heard from different people in the neighborhood, and we said, well, that sounded reasonable. Okay, yeah, let's take it out.
So it may be, additional comments are, we're looking forward to this 4 to 6 month study of what we can do there. You know, we don't have the information tonight or in the next week to set
Well,
up.
isn't this
let's
outside
do
that?
this.
Yeah, we're not doing
This
any
is-
Yeah,
study.
this is a little bit
We're
outside.
just-
This is another topic.
It'd
Yeah,
it'd
this
be
is-
down the roadways.
Not this
I
one.
think this is
Not
pretty
this one.
clear.
We wanna do it.
I'm inclined to not, I understand your explanation of the multifamily is sort of a moot point, but people are able to work wonders with numbers and lot sizes and percentages, and so it may be worth it to just get rid of that as well and just only allow 1 and 2.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
I'd be for that.
I didn't understand what you said.
So the proposal is to allow 1 and 2 family, not 3 and 4, but allow multi, which is 5 or more.
And internal conversions, just to
And internal
clarify, which could help retain existing structures.
Sure, yeah. So, Mr. Maybe's point was that the 5 and above, the lots aren't big enough, and you probably couldn't get that through the process anyway, which is potentially valid, but, you know, people work wonders with numbers and limits and percentages and whatever, so maybe it would be good to just, to take that out as well, and just only allow 1 and
Which
2.
I would support it. I mean, it just came down to, we have 400 pages of documents
Yeah.
and certain point things slip and you just get tired.
Yep.
But
And I agree with what he just said, I agree with you guys. This is not worth putting off, we already know it's pretty.
and it's just tiny.
This is not like the ADUs and the others.
Yeah.
I'd say something,
Before I-
but they've already said everything we were saying back then, and so
Okay.
I'm gonna go with what they said.
Just one small
Yes.
question. So would that mean the internal conversion 3 and 4 plexes would also not be allowed?
On the list, internal conversions is permitted.
As a 3 and 4 plex?
Mhm.
Any problems with that?
Yeah,
But it's
because
an
The
internal
building's
conversion.
already
the
there.
building
Right.
footprint doesn't
And
change.
that's prehistorically accurate, that
Yeah,
happened.
that happens.
And just to, I mean, if, I want to identify what the problem is we were trying to solve. If the problem is that 35 feet is too tall, then that's a height limit problem. If the problem is that we allow too much intensity of development, well, we also allow offices and a variety of other things. So I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
we're fixing the problem,
Okay.
whatever the problem is.
We weren't concerned about the density of an internal conversion 3 or 4 plex with the number of people, parking, people weren't
If there's
concerned with
anything there
that.
that could be
There's
changed
a lot
to 3 or
higher,
4.
I mean, there's a
But we're
lot
not-
more intense uses than
Parking is
multifamily.
Well, but
premium in
those-
Keneva.
Offices and those sorts of things are not 24-hour, 7-day-week uses as residential are.
Unless they change frickin' brewery over to a big apartment.
It's not an attractive historic building.
Anyone
Yeah,
else?
I think that's a
Before
really
I-
important clarification, you know,
Been there.
that the HC zone is a mixed-use zone. But, you know, you can parse out these separate uses and make that decision, so.
Well, my position is, I think you ought to exempt it and just leave it alone. It's a historical district, we call it that, people out there expect it to be remained. I think time will take care of the problem, but if we go stirring up the pot here, you're looking at problems down the line that are just gonna keep popping up, just keep popping up. Just leave that place alone. Exempt it.
Yeah, but, okay, but to leave it alone, we have to exclude 3 and 4 plexes,
Then exclude 3 and 4 places.
right?
And multifamily.
Well, if you want to
If the
continue,
rest of the code
I don't know what leave
provisions-
it alone is. If it's do what you can do today, then you would keep it in. If you don't want to allow it, take it out.
Yeah, don't take it out.
Right.
Take out 3 and 4 plexes.
Yeah, if you don't want to allow it, you can take it out. If you want to keep the status quo, then
Yeah.
keep it in.
The recommendation, as written, is to prohibit 3 to 4 plexes in this district.
Okay.
Right,
Any
okay.
additional
We have a-
recommendation
Sounds like we have a
prohibits.
Yeah,
consensus
tell
on
us
that.
what you want to
Okay.
do and why. Okay, can I repeat back? Because you're going to ask me what you said and why. I want to make sure I get it right. So, it sounds like you'll vote or come up with a thing, but majority of you want to not allow 3 and 4 plexes in the historic corridor, or historic district, and, in the zoning designation, but continue to allow multifamily. I heard some discussion. also recommend taking out
I
multifamily?
have a separate question.
Okay,
Well,
I-
it's 5 or above.
If you're only gonna be able to build half a dozen more houses, why not just cut it off right now and say, leave it alone, do nothing?
and then the reason why 3 and 4 plexes wouldn't be allowed is because,
It would violate the historical character of the zone.
well, it wouldn't because it's a use. The exterior of the buildings goes through historic review board.
I can't hear you.
3 and 4 units is a use, it's not a look. The look of the building still goes through historic review board. It sounds like the reason why we're taking out 3 and 4 plexes is because there traditionally weren't 3 and 4 plexes, not because the use is inappropriate, right? Or
They
the
didn't,
use of 3 and 4 plexes,
Yes.
sorry, let me restate that. The use
weren't
of 3
there.
and 4 plexes was not traditionally in this location.
No.
Okay, not that the use of a 3 and 4 plex, if it was filtered through HRB, would violate the historic district, because it can happen today.
Leave it alone.
Okay, I think I heard that, but thank you.
I'll be there.
So,
And
then there's the second question.
The
of,
second question.
And the rest.
And multifamily.
Multifamily, yeah. And as a person who's owned a 5-plex before, it's completely absurd to only have 5 units because the cost from 4 to 5 jumps so ridiculously high that you have to go like 8 or 10.
To make it
So-
feasible.
Yeah, I mean, unless there's some others, unless things have changed since I owned that property, but yeah.
See, now you're ready to go to my favorite one, which
Well,
is the height.
but we didn't answer the multifamily question.
We're talking about it now.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, if we're gonna take out 3 and 4, it seems odd to me that we would create a hole that you're allowed to do the small thing and the really big thing, but you're not allowed to do the thing in the middle. That seems
Well,
really.
was there any historic 5 and 6 plexes?
Just the body houses.
Not new construction, it would, if there were any divisions, they occurred within an existing building.
Okay.
But
So if we
a lot of the dwelling units in Kenema are small.
Right.
They really are, and you're not gonna get a whole lot of units out of them
Inside
to
of
make
one.
them habitable.
Yeah.
Because they were more vertical. If you look at the traditional pattern in Kenema, they're more vertical than they are horizontal, so you're going
The
up.
closest thing is on the waterfront, there was a couple of very short-term rentals.
The other thing I just want to clarify too is that this is a mixed-use zone, so when we say single-family and duplex, can you still have the unit upstairs on a commercial or a couple units upstairs on the commercial? That's okay? Okay, so up to 2 upstairs is fine. I just want to clarify, since we're taking out 3 and 4 plex, that we make sure that we get the language right on how it interacts with the mixed-use
Because that's
component.
actually what you had. You had the store on the floor and.
Yeah.
And then up to 2 above. Okay, got it.
As long as we can legally
So-
prohibit the use.
Do we need to make motions?
Yeah, I was just
for
gonna say,
this?
we might need a motion on this one because it's a little different than continuing what the planning commission previously recommended.
Well, we had discussion about it, but we didn't quite
Your,
get there.
yeah, your recommendation was just to exclude 3 and 4
Yeah,
plexes.
we were trying to figure out how to.
So
get
now
to-
I think what we're discussing is excluding 3 and 4 plexes and multifamily.
Yes, yes.
We were trying to.
Okay, is there,
Well, not,
Exclude.
Can we legally do that?
excluding them from this zone?
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion, but I'm totally confused at
Well,
what
wait,
wording to use.
but multifamily,
a motion to add multifamily and 3 to 4 plexes to the
Okay, so just
prohibited
throw your
uses.
Yeah, like what Pete
You
said.
can keep it simple language and say no 3 and 4 plexes or multifamily
what
and
Pete just
HC.
said.
Or to do it, just keep it super simple and we'll do all the wording.
Pete, would you repeat it, what you just said?
It wasn't.
It's a motion to
As recommended.
add multifamily and 3 to 4 plexes as prohibited uses in the HC.
I move that.
historic commercial.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
And then also to allow the 2 units, up to 2 units above through mixed use.
Above,
Yeah.
above a commercial space below.
Allow
Yeah.
2 units above commercials.
Is that all part of the same motion?
If you want to include
It
it.
might as well.
Okay.
And so you agree to add that to your
Yeah.
motion? Do you agree to add it to your
I
second?
second.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh,
Are we clear on what we're voting on?
So allow up to 2 units mixed above, prohibit 3 and 4 plexes and multifamily and HC.
In this zone? Correct. Okay, so,
Patty, sometimes you.
any further discussion?
Still gonna
Any
go
further
through
discussion?
sections.
Pete, call a roll, please.
Commissioner Gage,
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll,
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahoney,
Aye.
Commissioner Guile.
I like the way you've shaken it up tonight. Aye.
And then, just to clarify, since I have to explain, it's because these uses traditionally weren't on this corridor.
Right.
Got it.
And just so I
That's
can
the
clarify
simplest
for myself,
explanation.
this is a recommendation, not a final decision regarding zoning.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All of these are our recommendations to the city commission.
And then Pete we'll tell you later, but we'll tell you our timeline of when we tell the city commission.
Okay,
But they're very good.
Do you know
Next
anybody,
up.
know anybody on the
Next topic.
commission?
Okay, the next topic we're discussing is the height limit in the mixed-use downtown district for properties located outside of the downtown design district. I've got a series of maps to help illustrate what is currently on the books and what was discussed.
Pete, before we do that, was there one other one? This is
This
this the last one?
Yeah, the next,
no, the
The notice.
notification.
the notice area. Do you wanna
Okay, the
discuss
notice might be
area
quicker
first?
if you want to go to that next.
You want quicker first or harder first?
So why did this come back up, the notice requirement?
Me.
The
Oh,
city
okay.
commission, the city commission brought it back up.
Okay.
300-foot.
I
But
started it.
do you want to do the easy one first?
Easy bit.
Shorter or longer one first?
Short.
Sure.
The notice area first
It's
or
your
this?
issue and you're
I'm
the
here all
chair,
night,
so.
so.
Which one do you care about both? You want to comment on both, or we'll go with the one that you want to comment on?
I'm here all night, so.
We talked about both of them.
I'd say you're
Okay.
probably more likely to come to a resolution about the notice one,
Okay.
if you want to
let's
just
talk
cross that
about
off
the
the
notice.
list.
Okay, discussion is whether to change or retain the mailed notice area requirement of 300 feet to neighboring property owners for type 2 through 4 development. So currently, state law for what we call limited land use decisions, which are majority of the land use decisions that are made, requires a minimum mailed public notice area of 100 feet from the boundaries of the property. City has used a 300-foot mailed notice area since 1954, even though when you look back through the old codes, they didn't have type 2 decisions written out in the 1954 code. They had a lot of planning commission hearings for just about everything, and we would do 300-foot nailed notices back then. County apparently uses a 500-foot notice area. They do have larger parcels. They're outside the urban growth boundary or outside the city limit, and they have a larger notice area. So one of the questions is, what is the problem we are trying to solve? Do we want more responses? Do we want better understandings of the proposals? Do we want greater transparency? So these are things we want to be thinking about. What we did was, based on a suggestion, we're using City Hall as an example. Under current code, the map on the left in the red highlighted area shows the tax lots that would be mailed public notice under current code of 300 feet. So depending on the shape of the tax lot, it can look pretty strange. It's taking into account here the tax lot, which is Promontory Park, which is a city-owned parcel. In this situation, you have 45 tax lots and 39 taxpayers. Middle one, you have a radius of 400 feet. That hits 77 tax lots and 63 taxpayers. And on the right, you have 500 feet. That's 99 tax lots and 77 taxpayers. And here's what minimum state law would look like. You would only get 16 tax lots and 15 taxpayers. Statutory requirement is in ORS 197-195 for limited land use decisions. You have to take the most recent tax roll to get the taxpayers' names, and then you have to also provide notice to any neighborhood or community organization recognized by the governing body and whose boundaries include the site. We also have several other ways that we provide notice and ways to get information. We have a development projects website on the city website with a map interface where we, once an application is deemed complete and the public notice goes out, it's uploaded to this site. So that's one where, one way to look at everything that's not just a building permit. So anything that's a type 2 land use decision and higher would fall on this project website. And there's the mailed notice. We did an analysis of mailed notices in 2018, and doing just a rough average, we estimated that we're getting a response rate of approximately 3% on the mailed notices.
At 300 feet.
At 300 feet. Property signs are posted every 600 feet of property, of frontage on the property. This is our standard land use notice sign. And we provide email notice to a distribution list that we maintain of city and county departments, local and state agencies, neighborhood associations, and the Citizen Involvement Committee. It's approximately 60 parties. And then we have the postcard process that lets neighborhood associations communicate with their members, and those mailing lists are maintained through the GIS department and sent to the neighborhood association chairs and CIC members. And then the newspaper. We have to use a newspaper of general circulation, which is either Oregon City News or in some cases the Oregonian. And then you have the standard public hearing notice process, which requires that you post an agenda 1 week prior to the hearing, and that agenda is sent out to our email distribution list. We also have what's called an email subscription or listserv sign-up process, where if you sign up for this and there's something is uploaded to that site, you will get a notice in your mailbox.
Question, offhand, do you know how many people subscribe to any of these?
That's a great question. I don't know what the
Just
stats
curious.
are, but we'll get that.
Most people didn't even know it existed. I was a commissioner for 6 years and never knew it existed.
So I mentioned, this is the same slide I had before. With that, I'd like to entertain a discussion.
Did we discuss this? I didn't think so.
We thought it was adequate the way it was, given all the options that are available, so I'm just assuming this came up at the city commission meeting?
Yeah, did you guys, we had a slight conversation about it, it just, you didn't propose to change it.
Yeah, our conversation more devolved into, nobody can read the postcards because there's so much information that has to be on it. And that's the problem.
We're
If
talking
we,
about not the
The
postcard.
little
but
postcard, not
The
the,
notice.
well,
The sign.
both, but
the signs can't read, they're usually
So
all
I'm a little confused about the finances of this. Who pays for the postcards?
The city allocates a certain amount of money to the CIC and neighborhood associations each year.
I think he's
No, I
talking
mean,
about the 300
I mean
foot
the
ones.
land use postcards, not the.
Oh,
There is no
I pay.
postcard.
Yeah, they-
What?
The notices you get in the mail, the same things that get put up on the sign, I pay for those. And we don't charge we charge a fee for site plan design review, which doesn't include a separate fee for how many notices we send. So, we end up, staff will print out notices, print the notice itself, put the mailing label on, stuff them, fold them, drive down to City Hall, put them through the mail machine, and then off they go. So staff does that. There's no higher fee for like the college and some of the larger properties. We tend to have larger properties have bigger projects like the county and so forth. Those have lots of notices, but there's no separate fee for any of those.
Give me my take on this.
We spend about 8,500 on stamps each year, but that doesn't include like the
Have a
time and then the
nonprofit.
paper.
You don't have a nonprofit?
We're not a nonprofit. No, we run them through a mail machine. We have a bulk postage,
mailing.
but these they're not bulk.
In all the years that I've been involved in this, the one thing I hear the complaint is that they don't receive notification. And some of it's outside the UGB, so like on Holly Lane, so I guess that's not included in the
It
city.
is included.
Because I mean, every time Christine Kozinski would come in here, we never received this or that.
Well, but she's not within 500 or 300 feet of
Well,
the
that's what
city
I'm saying.
limits, but we do, so if we're on the edge, our boundary expands outside city limits.
That's where I was going with it. I hear, we've heard so many times where people didn't get notifications during the recent code hearings in September, October, November. We didn't have that much participation. A lot of people were confused, but they don't take the Oregonian anymore because it's more of a small circular than a newspaper anymore. The Oregon City News, every time I talk to Raymond, there's not that many people taking that. They don't know that it exists on the city, so the mailings is the only way sometimes people get notified of our neighborhood association meeting or of something happening throughout the city. I've not been satisfied with the 300 feet since I've been here, because I keep thinking it should be 500. It only increases by 22, looking at that one area there. But people just need to know what we're doing, and that's why I started some of my websites, Oregon City Raw, was to let people know about meetings and when they're happening, because so few people hear, or they don't get the postcard. And that's been my concern, is communications are so lacking, and not your fault.
No, but I mean, I think you hit it. You can't do one thing and expect
No.
everyone to know. We do the notices, and the neighborhood associations
Yeah.
do their cards. Not all of, but, there's all those different ways, the
Yeah.
online signups,
And if
whatever you
somebody
guys do
doesn't know the meetings-
online.
If somebody doesn't know to look, because they don't know something's happening in their neighborhood, they can't go to the website, because, oh, I didn't know that was happening, and that's what we hear a lot. We came into the meeting, we didn't know it was even happening. You hear that a lot. What do we hear about those, with those tents,
Membrane structures.
membrane structures? We didn't hear a word about it. I mean, it just,
Yeah, the question is just like, there's signs on the property and all these other avenues. A return rate, or the rate of getting comment based off mailing notices, is 3% at this tight of radius. If you go wider, is it gonna get better? What,
tested.
what are we going for, and are we going to achieve it?
We just add a small fee to the application, increase the radius.
I thought
How
that
much would
was
it be?
paid.
How much more per application do you think it would add?
A 3% return on your money is not much of a,
That'll be the same depending on.
It's 3 times better than the bank.
Any.
Yeah, it's not that we shouldn't do it, it's just at what point should we supplement with all the other ways, and was what the last planning
I
commission
guess
said.
I wanna just support the existing system, because if we wanna use an example of somebody who lives outside the city limits, if they are concerned about applications that they might not see, I think that they have an opportunity to apply to the listserv. It doesn't cost them anything, they put down which ones that they want, and I will say that the majority of people have email. Now, not everybody does, and not everybody looks at them, but I think that going out further, although at one time I supported that, I think that it's a two-way street. The next thing we're gonna get asked is, okay, can the city just come and hand me the information, at my door?
And explain it to me before I close the door.
Yeah, so, are we gonna go to door hangers? Citizen involvement is a two-way
Requires the
street.
citizen to be involved.
And so if you're gonna be involved and you say that you don't know something, then I think it's behooves one to step up a little bit. I think the city does a pretty good job of making different ways for people to be notified. I didn't get the notice about the county, the OSU Extension doing their building, but I knew it was coming. So
'Cause you're
when I
involved.
when I saw the signs along Warner Milne and Beaver Creek, I did find an opportunity to find a place to pull over so I could actually go and read it, because, there's no ways to pull over on Warner Milne, and there's no place to pull over on Beaver Creek. So I went to the county health department, pulled over, walked across the street, and I said, oh, it's just the OSU, not just, but it was the OSU Extension, and I knew what they were doing. So I went to the website and, looked it up and said, okay, well, this, neither here nor there, but anyway, so I think we do a lot. And there's a responsibility that if you get something from the city in the mail, please open it. It might be something that pertains to you. Don't just toss it and then come in and say, I didn't know what was going on. When the membrane thing, now that was not a publication at one point. It was a concern brought by some citizens, so there was nothing posted about it. And once it got posted, the word got out and people found out about it and they came and talked to us about it.
On
We
the
made a
rare occasion,
recommendation.
on the rare occasion that you and I will disagree, Park Place is more than 300 feet across. I'm not sure about McLaughlin.
Well,
So
we're talking
when-
about 300 feet from that particular property.
And so let's
not-
say the Park Place concept plan, that's not gonna reach
That's a
anybody down below on
completely
Holcomb.
different type of notice. That's legislative. That's a different process for notice. We're talking about land use notice.
It still involves traffic and everybody else that
It does, but
could be.
there's a different requirement. So didn't we all get in the mail when we had a legislative amendment? We got a postcard that said the city is proposing to do blah, 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 blah with
legislative.
codes, and that's legislative. So everybody who's got an address in Oregon City got one of those. So you can't get much more notice
What's
than
like
that.
land use for the decision we had earlier tonight? I never even knew what was going on. I guess I wasn't at that Park Place meeting, but we didn't get
But-
postcards about that.
But the
when we
property was
discussed.
posted, and you could have seen
It's
it.
down a side street in Hiram. It's not anywhere near Holcomb. We didn't know anything was
Well,
going on down there.
I know, but there's a certain amount of responsibility on the other side too.
How do you know something's happening if if it's so far off the
You
main
subscribe to the
road?
listserv,
You don't
so that
know.
way you'll
Subscribe to
find
the
out.
list, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, to
Sorry,
me,
Damon, go ahead.
the biggest problem was the car that you got was just full of,
Well, that's a different topic.
well, no, I mean, even, because when they were doing stuff with the hospital, I got mailed. Actually, no, my dad got mailed. I didn't because I'm 308 feet away. But my dad's, so anyway, and there's just, sometimes it just seems like the simple thing is to say, hey, there's a subdivision coming, go to this website and find out about it. You're gonna get response from that. Hey, there's a Walmart coming, hey, there's a road widening project, go to the website and, but when it's just packed with, and, 17.3, your sewer rates might go up, and 19.5, your trees might be, whatever, okay, and so, but that's not necessarily what this is talking about, but that was the biggest thing that we got is that they were just confusing.
Pete, can you go back to the slide with the different
I speak
distances?
plain, I know what they're talking about.
The different methods?
No, the distances, the
Oh,
circles.
the distances, yeah.
I think I started this thing,
Fine.
because at the city commission meeting, the way the agenda read, it almost looked to me like they were gonna reduce the 300 feet. I personally don't think 300 feet is enough. If you lived here at City Hall on 300 feet, if you lived here, or excuse me, somebody living at City Hall wanted to do something, and you lived at the fire station, you could practically throw a rock and hit the fire station, you wouldn't get a postcard.
Yep.
I personally don't think that's enough. But I'm gonna get down off my soapbox because my understanding, and I was obviously misunderstood, was that the developers paid for the postcard. So without knowing how much money that
It's not a
will
postcard,
cost.
you get a mailed notice, a notice of land use action. It's not a postcard. The postcards are what the neighborhood associations mail out for their meetings.
No, the 300 foot is also a postcard, isn't it?
No,
It's 8.5 by 11 thing.
11, it looks like
Oh, it's
that.
this, okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
And on the back, there's a map.
Right, okay. I didn't realize that was on our dime, and I didn't realize that was on city staff time. So without knowing, in this case, we know what it would amount to, but in a lot of cases, my geometry fails me, but the number goes up more than twice as
Get out
much
of
if you make it
Gaffney
more than
Lane
twice
and
as
you're-
big.
yeah.
Pi figures in there somewhere, somehow, I remember, anyway. So I think we need to leave it alone without knowing what it might cost us and how much more time it might cost. And to your point, there are a lot of ways. Indulge me on one other thing. Would you flip to this, the homepage of the website?
Oh.
You had it up as one of the slides. I really would like to see that development projects be in that banner at the bottom of the front page. The numbers of people, I've been involved in website design before, the percentage of people that click out when they can't find what they want on the homepage is huge. I realize all I have to do is click on how do I, and then it's there. Half the people, I don't remember the numbers, but an awful lot of, a huge percentage of people won't even click one time and look, and it's buried in all that other stuff on the how do I. So once again, I'll get off my soapbox on the 300
Right,
feet, but I'm back on it.
It is buried.
I really would like it on that banner across the bottom of the page. I was on a study group that worked on this website redesign several
Talking
years
about the one
ago.
that says calendar development, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah. Oh,
right. And the intention was for those items across the bottom to be the most hit spots on the website. And they really are. And the one that's missing is development projects. So I'm gonna get back on that soapbox and I'm off the other one. But it's up to the group whether we want to pursue 300 feet. Anybody?
We're,
think-
we're 3 times greater than the state
but
minimum requirement.
That doesn't mean the
Leave-
state's
leave it
right.
alone. I know.
Okay.
Leave it
But
alone.
we're off that.
I think the 300 feet is fine.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. If we're gonna assume there's 3%, you're gonna have, in 300 foot, in this example, you're gonna have 1.5 responses, 2 responses, and 3 responses. I mean, it's, yeah, leave it alone.
I agree.
Leave it alone.
I agree, leave it alone.
Being a communications specialist and from college, I disagree wholeheartedly. Communications is key to the operations of the city and to the satisfaction of the residents and the taxpayers.
But the person has to want to click on it. That's, again, it's up.
They don't know it exists. Most people don't know this exists in this city. They don't know when meetings happen. They don't know anything about the
Tom,
city.
where do you draw the line?
Right.
I say for 200 feet more, you get more than twice the number of
Yeah,
people.
but you're right, Matt. Where do you draw the line? Do we go 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet, a quarter of a mile, a mile? I mean, and we're still
I'd
gonna
be
get,
satisfied at a mile.
we're still gonna get, but you gotta look at the cost. My God almighty, the cost of doing that. And the return you'd get on that, we'd probably get about 10, 15 more people.
But I agree with what somebody said, was it you, Dirk, that if the developers are asking for this and it's sending out something that's a land use that they want, they should pick up that minor cost. It's minor to mail this out. The developers or whoever, they should pick that up as part of their cost. Because we're sending out notifications about their request to do a land use. They should pick up that small minor cost. There's staff time, I know that. But I mean, for mailing, because I've mailed out for nonprofits for years. But it just seems to me that
Okay.
they should pick it up.
I don't think you're gonna get the response that you're hoping for. It's just not there.
People don't
If
recognize
it were,
my
we'd
increase.
have this,
I
this
think
room
that-
packed.
I think the
Okay, I'll be
consensus,
the lone disagreeer,
I think the consensus is pretty clear that we leave the 300 feet alone.
and we'll never have anybody at our
You wanted
meetings.
to- Did you want to have Pete call, just so you're on the
You
same
think we need
page?
a
or-
motion?
Did you do it last time?
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
I do.
all right. Somebody care to move to,
Stay up to
yeah,
get this.
somebody make a motion.
I moved to make it 500. But there won't be a second.
Is there a second?
None. No, not me.
Okay. Guys, for lack of a second.
I move that we retain the 300-foot notification, what would you call it, radius?
Yeah.
Area, and so recommend that to the city commission.
Second.
Oh, it's a raise.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Call the roll.
Let's see, Commissioner Mahoney.
Aye.
Commissioner Guile.
Wholeheartedly disagree.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Schlangenhofer.
Aye.
Commissioner Gage.
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll.
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
Before you guys move on to the next one, again, I want to summarize everything since I will explain it to the city commission. We want to keep the 300-foot radius because of the cost
Cost,
of
it sounds like.
increasing, the other avenues that you have for people to participate. Is that it, or is there other stuff?
Did you
That's
say
the
the
cost
cost
versus
part last?
lack of
Because
return.
that's not the prime motivators that we, you wanna say.
No, yes, last, got it.
Yeah, put that last.
What
Because
is
if you
last?
start out with it costing something,
That
That's
is
the-
certainly not
that
the
sounds like
driver
main reason.
whatsoever.
That sounds like the main reason everybody brought up, cost, not the last.
Well, it was also because of the low return rate, right?
But that's
Is that the
an
third?
experiment. Look how many, on that 300 feet, there was only 2 doors down, 2 blocks. That's all that 300-foot radius did on that sample that was out here.
State only requires 100 feet.
If you go to 500.
We're in a
feet,
city
you'll
that
have
state
more
is a
just
big,
outside the
huge
edge.
open area, but anyway, I disagree.
Okay, so can I say them just in order to just make sure I'm getting them right?
We're still gonna have.
The variety of ways in which we communicate projects to the public or that they can learn about projects, the low return rate on the mailed notices and the relative costs when you increase it, as well as
And I would just say,
I think the
I wrote
city's-
something, I can't really read it.
City's doing everything it can.
Oh, it's above
They
the
do
state
do everything
requirement.
They can, I agree, Bob. It's just that I feel we're gonna continue to have low
Can
meeting
you add
turnouts.
the,
But I agree, they do everything they
development
can.
projects on the
Just people
banner
don't
below,
read and
because
don't
I think
look.
that would be
I agree.
And there's
I
no
sent
way
an
to
email to our
enforce it.
IT before, but I just did it while you were right here.
good.
So I'm like, I
If he
don't
says you
control the
can do it-
website.
If he says you can do it, then put that into the report that we're going to move this based on a suggestion to see if we get more
we're
of a
gonna highlight it as
response.
a banner
Okay.
on the
And
homepage.
I wanna make this positive, I don't want it to be negative. It
Good
it
idea.
should be positive, that we're gonna try moving this to see if we get more of a click rate. You know, that we think that there are many options for opportunities to participate.
Another thought. I was shocked at the city survey at how many people get their news from the Trail News.
Oh, yeah.
When was the last time the Trail News promoted signing up for listserv?
Did we just add that this time?
Signing up for.
I'll double check.
For the email list.
The listserv, get on the listserv.
We
People
talked
are
about
looking at-
adding that
a lot of
based
people
off our
look at the Trail
discussions, but
News
I'll
and it's
double
like,
check.
hey, I can get, I know we can't use the Trail News for land use notice because it's
No.
not timely. But we could promote, hey, here's how a way to sign up.
Yeah.
Don't get surprised at something that happens down the street from you,
You
sign
just have
up
to
here.
open them up, what I do
Never
is if
seen
it
that
doesn't
in there.
pertain to me, I just don't, I don't open it up all, I look to see
Yeah.
where it is, and I think, okay, do I need to pay attention to that? Or do I not need to pay attention to it? And sometimes I say, no, I don't need to pay attention to it.
I'd like to see us promote that in there if we haven't
Okay.
recently.
Block letters.
And that's cheap.
70 font.
Next,
Okay, fourth item is discussion about height limits in the mixed-use downtown zone. So we are revisiting this. There will be a joint work session with the city commission. We haven't fixed a date yet.
And why do they wanna do that?
Well, we'll go through this.
We need to meet, I don't want to.
And we'll go back through the planning commission's recommendation as well. So the discussion about this, in the code, there are basically 4 areas within the mixed-use downtown zone which have a height limit that is less than the 75-foot height limit that is in the remainder of the zone. First one is the area between Main Street and McLaughlin Boulevard and 11th and 16th Streets, which is the area indicated. And on this map, which is showing you contours at 10-foot intervals, and those blocks are highlighted in yellow. So they're separating McLaughlin Boulevard from the rest of the mixed-use downtown zone, but it's the area north of Main Street. And you can see the, excuse me, you can see the bluff area and Abernathy Creek. So you get an idea of the topography in that area. The discussion by the planning commission where there was that, there are views towards the river here and they're important to protect. And while there's some variation in the topography and it's, the area along the center street where the train trestle is a little bit of a low point compared to where the riverbank is. And McLaughlin Boulevard itself, the decision of the planning commission was to keep this code restriction in place. The other areas that are limited in height is any property that is occupied by a single-family detached or attached use within the mixed-use downtown zone. The current code restricts the height of a new building to 45 feet within 100 feet of those properties. And so there's another, what we attempted to do on this slide was to use red dots to show where we believe single-family residences are within 100 feet. You can see that on the northern edge of the mixed-use downtown zone, which extends clear up to the bridge across the Clackamas River where the Tri-Cities plant is. But you have a few properties that are occupied by single-family residences, and then you have along Apperson Boulevard on the west side of Apperson Boulevard up on the bluff there, you have properties that are vertically quite far away from where the mixed-use downtown zone is, but they're actually within 100 feet of that tax lot. So they would have the effect of, you know, limiting the height of a new building in an area that is actually below them. And then as you get closer towards the center of Main Street, you know, you have a lot of scattered single-family, which are, you know, pre-existing single-family homes within the district. So the,
Could we just do a bigger disclaimer on this one? This map is not perfect, and we know
it
that.
is not perfect.
We
Yeah,
figured out what
yeah.
are the non-vacant properties without business licenses. So, I mean, take it for what it's worth. There's a dot where we think there may be a home. It may, the confidence rate is not 100% on this particular map, but it gives you a general sense for, you know, properties within 100 feet of all those dots.
So the planning commission's recommendation was to change the wording that says within 100 feet of to abutting, so that it's not going to have quite the effect that it would.
Does abutting include across the street or just contiguous?
Just contiguous, yeah, and we're talking contiguous tax lots.
Right.
Correct, yeah. So it might have some effect, but it wouldn't have, we were talking about some pretty big tax lots in this district, you know. And then the other district, there's the Downtown Design District, which is the area outlined in green here. And in the code, it talks about the Masonic Hall having a height of 58 feet, and that is the height limit in the Downtown Design District. And then to the south of there, you've got the Willamette Falls Downtown District, which has a height limit of 80, and then elsewhere in the mixed-use downtown zone, 75 feet north of there. And that district, I took a measurement, it's approximately 580 feet from the river to the railroad track, and about, I want to say about 1,700 feet long. And then we also have a 45-foot height limit within 500 feet of the end of the Oregon Trail Center. And that has the effect shown here where these tax lots would be affected by that.
Is the hotel in that area?
Yes,
And is it higher than
proposed
45?
hotel.
Unfortunately, this is a little misleading. He's giving you way more information than what we talked about. So I hope you're not confused.
Right.
So the area we were specifically honing in on, and Vern and Bob and Tom, we were talking about the area between, it was your first slide.
10th and 16th.
Yeah, we were
This is what
talking
we're talking
about
about.
that area
11th.
specifically. We didn't get
Right.
into the end of the Oregon Trail area, we didn't get into downtown, we didn't get into the Willamette Falls District. We were talking about that area, and that's why we recommended changing it to abutting, because there is less of an impact on anything that might occur in that particular district. And I remember Bob's comment about, because I think Pete, Bob asked you to do some measuring, and we figured out that it would be minimally impacted.
Just to clarify, so the planning staff did not propose any recommendations to MUD except for to look at that block that you were just looking at and the abutting section, so two different provisions. One, if you're abutting a single-family home, a use, what does your height have to be? And it used to say if you're within 100 feet of a home, it's got changed to abutting a home. We know that there are a lot of non-conforming homes in and around that zoning designation. And then the other part was that block between 11th and 16th, and if that should stay lower or be taller. And the city commission wanted us to look at all of the MUD a little bit more.
Basically all of them.
Why would we need a meeting with them about that?
Well, that's a very good question.
They identified it as being a very complex
It is?
topic, and so that's where this joint work session came in, to sort of hear more from you.
Maybe be a short meeting then.
Is there somebody who owns that land down there, all that
No,
stretch?
I don't think, I mean, I'm just one person, but I
Previous
don't think
mayor.
it's as complex as
No,
what I'm hearing that it's complex.
Yeah.
and just to clarify, staff did propose, can you go back to the 11th one? Staff did propose, and I can't remember if the Equitable Housing Group also proposed removal of that 45-foot to be 75-foot in that section too. And so, that's not what the planning commission recommendation was. So that one was a little bit more complex?
Yeah, that was the crux of the issue. It wasn't
Yes.
all the other,
Right.
we thought all the other ones were
Yeah.
fine.
Okay,
Once
where
we
did
solve
the-
the abutting question,
Where did the end of the Oregon Trail District?
we left it alone.
We didn't want to touch it.
We don't wanna touch it.
So that restriction's already in place?
It's
Yes.
already
Yeah.
there.
It's already
That was
in
not
place.
subject to this.
But to be honest, a lot of this discussion, the reason why we believe the end of the Oregon Trail is around is because for protection between the end of the Oregon Trail and the freeway, so that you could see the hoops from the freeway.
Exactly.
This provision protects more than that, right? It goes back and around and all the different locations. It's a complicated topic when it comes to EOT, and so we were trying to sort of keep the blinders on the project as much as possible. There's a joke there, I'm sure.
Yes.
So that's why staff had suggested removing this section where the height abutting any residential zone or use is deleted. Clearly, we don't even have a map of where all the residential uses are. And then also removal of this height limit. And then what came out was retaining this height limit, and then instead of 100 feet within a residential use, just make it if you're abutting a residential use, you're a little bit lower in height.
I know, I brought up the issue of, so you're up here on the bluff on 11th, you got the railroad trestle, you got some other stuff coming down, and it steps down to the river. So that you're not having this massive building corridor along one of the most visible parts of our city. So that's why we didn't,
And why we weren't concerned about the 75 feet back from there, because the ground drops.
drops.
So, yes, it's still gonna be higher than 45 feet effectively, but you're gonna lose 15 of that distance just with the ground dropping it. And also, we were a little concerned with the, to a certain extent, creating a false bluff for people driving down McLaughlin. And here's just this wall of buildings, and not knowing that there's another bluff, and that there's, the McLaughlin house being visible, and, the Poe building, and all those,
I don't think they'd ever get that high, but
well, if you're driving along, you are looking at a 75-foot wall, you're not seeing anything on the bluff. So,
The concern on staff's behalf is this is a regional center. These height limits are haphazard, and some of them are a little arbitrary, or we're trying to figure out even why we did it in the first place, and sometimes it was a little bit of a struggle. And so it was a concern of if it should be more cohesive, and, if we really want to help support redevelopment within the regional center and in blocks like this, should it be allowed to be higher?
that's the question.
Right.
Does it all have to be the same? I mean, don't we want to have some variety of buildings and building heights?
and articulation.
And articulations, I mean, you
favorite
just go down to the Pearl and look at the example, you've got these walled corridors now, you're walking down the sidewalk, and you don't get to see any sunlight, because you've got tall, super tall buildings, it's so unpedestrian friendly, and if we're trying to promote people walking places, it doesn't all have to be the same.
These are very different scale than the Pearl though, right? I mean, our max height is very,
Well,
Modest
it's still a tall
compared.
building,
yeah. I mean, when you're a pedestrian, it's still,
yeah.
you still gotta turn your neck.
Yeah, not that you really wanna look up there, but, the likelihood that that's gonna pencil, we don't know.
But so a lot of the discussion was like, what does it mean to be a regional center? What does it mean to have these? What does it mean to preserve views or not preserve views? What are those trade-offs?
That's a total of 5 blocks out of the entire Oregon City downtown area.
And then I also, full disclosure, the city owns some of those, one of those too.
And if
Something
there's a
just-
reason, they can ask for an exception.
And they're not, this came from our Equitable Housing Group and me to say we should have a more cohesive regional center, and it should act more like a regional center if we ever want
What
to.
do you mean by, I'm not familiar with regional center, what does that mean?
You wanna talk about Pete?
So this, sorry, the area that's outlined here is one of 16 regional centers in the metro region. So Metro has identified it as an area that will get priority for transportation funding. You have to adopt urban zoning if you're going to implement that vision. And so that's what the MUD zone is partly intended to do, and that's why it extends for such a large area from the south of downtown clear up to the northern
So these
end.
are basically the downtown areas of each city in Metro.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
And that they're
Can you go to the-
transportation hubs that
yeah, that's right.
kind of would end, and then there would be another spoke coming out.
Can you go to the downtown design district?
Yeah.
Okay, so it ends in the middle of that block on Main Street. So it's ends between 10th and 11th.
So there's,
Okay, so go to the one with the
Where you have-
45-foot strip.
Actually, yeah, the 75 isn't right, but
Yeah, so you're gonna, in the middle,
Oh.
you're gonna go 58 to 75 to 45.
for a half a building.
Yeah. That 45-foot,
You're right.
that 45-foot should extend to meet the edge of the design district.
Or the 58 to the
So-
11.
Yeah, but you don't wanna changing the dimensions of the downtown design district is probably.
Yeah, the historic
It's probably
corridor is
more-
to 10,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
it
it's-
doesn't
that's the
extend beyond
gap right
11, even
there.
though there's a couple of
Yeah.
historic buildings
Yeah.
that the county
Yeah.
owns
Yeah.
Right.
on 11th and
So
12th.
I'd suggest you stretch your little yellow blocks down so it hits the edge of the downtown design district.
Can we talk more about why those yellow blocks should be 45 and not 75?
Yeah, here's the problem that I have. We're trying to make a 3D decision with 2D tools. Google Earth, there's 100 kids at Oregon City High School that could create 3D renderings of 45-foot and 75-foot buildings on there for us to look at.
We asked
So
about
we
that.
would know what we're looking at.
We asked about that.
We have some cross sections of topography.
Well, I saw that, but that
She's
doesn't
Okay.
talking
help.
about putting buildings on it to make it, so you can see
Do a
exactly
rendering.
what the
Show me
articulation is.
side by side, here's what a 45-foot building looks like on those blocks, and here's what a 75, if I'm, at Barclay Park or whatever, somewhere, you know.
No, if you're at Center Street, that's where you're
Yeah.
looking at.
Well,
There we go.
you just said.
We can,
That's a good.
you don't have to solve this one tonight
Right.
if you don't want to. If you
Well,
want,
we
if
can't,
you
we got
need,
10 minutes, I don't think we will.
you need tools like this, we'll
But it is a good catch, that half block, because
see if we can find
lo
something.
and behold, the high rise
Opinion is
pops
that
up.
we don't need a work session. The planning commission can solve this and make a recommendation, to be honest with you.
If you want to talk about it at the next city commission
Yeah.
meeting, but, so I'm hearing the things you need to answer this question are, and then give me a list. Google some type of
3D
3D
rendering.
rendering-ish,
A 45.
I mean, light, like, right, I mean, not.
Yep.
I know.
That was all.
Anything else? Do we need to know more about why or what, or?
Is
Well-
anyone who decided it originally still around?
Pardon?
Is anyone who implemented that around?
She just passed away,
Oh, well, there you have it.
so, no. she's
We,
gone.
Alright.
yeah, for this block, we thought it was a little bit of a guess why it was implemented, but we thought it was from retained views down the hill, but there's still buildings in the way. And then, so it wasn't what Commissioner maybe said about it not being really tall all along McLaughlin.
When was
So
it implemented?
the stepping,
Decade
right?
ago.
Like
Yeah.
70s, 80s?
It was that way when I worked here.
You know, you're gonna put about 5, 10, 15,000 more people on the streets down there. If you do that and add in the pedestrian traffic you're gonna get from, the Legacy.
There's nowhere to
Well,
go.
What are you gonna do with 10,000 people?
Well, but the Equitable Housing Group was saying that you could put more apartments, or you probably have more likelihood of living in downtown if you had more height to go up.
Oh, they still end up with 10, 15,000 people on the streets.
We have a TDM plan that we're working on for transportation demand management.
What are the two heights we're talking about,
45 and 75.
Okay,
Why are there
So-
only two numbers?
Okay, so we'll come back.
we'll come back with that. I think you got a general idea of what some of our concerns.
Before we move from that map, Pete, back to that map real quick. Does our river have the measles? What is that?
The LiDAR satellite data bounced off something in the river and made all those weird squiggles.
So that's all the rocks I've been hitting with my boat motor?
He said it's the sea lions.
Yeah, I'd say
Then
it's
sea
sea lions.
lions, yeah.
There you go. Sea lions, right.
But yeah, probably just the way the waves were breaking, it was reflecting the LiDAR off.
Are salmon running? All right.
Okay, ready to move on?
Thanks.
Last item on our agenda is approval of minutes.
Can we go home now?
Yes, you can.
Except
And
these are your
thank you
minutes.
Thank you.
again
Thank you
for
very
taking the time to
Thank
be here. It's
you.
much
Anytime,
appreciated.
my time is your time. Just, Laura will call. I've given her carte blanche to call anytime.
So I was
We
wondering
can
on
help
those
you do
minutes,
it right.
how our group here can approve them, since some of them going back to January of last year.
I know.
You're obligated,
That's why I take
someone's gotta
copious
approve them,
notes.
I was
so
gonna say, they don't even know what we discussed.
you don't have to have been there.
You just have to have read it.
Because if you didn't have to be there, then a lot of cases we were way far back, they would never get approved.
Why is that coming back from January of 2018?
Somebody must have discovered that they never got approved.
There's a
We have
strange
a,
gap here, so.
yeah, we have a consultant that does minutes and, we even hired another one to try and help
Thank
get us
you.
caught up.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Okay, so with the understanding that we really don't know because we weren't here, the second page of my agenda disappeared. Somebody got I don't see the dates.
So the
We need a
dates for
motion to
these are
approve.
January the 14th, 2019, which is the most recent one that we have, and then the others are from 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we
Can we
need
just
three
do a
separate
blanket?
motions, or can we entertain one motion to approve all three?
One motion.
You can do all three
Okay.
together.
Somebody have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes from the three that are listed here, 2019, 2018. Is that enough?
I'll second.
Do I need to say the
Burn
dates?
second? Okay. Commissioner Guile, motion, and Commissioner Johnson, second. Any discussion?
Commissioner-
Call or roll?
Chair Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll,
Aye.
Commissioner Gage,
Aye.
Commissioner Schlangenhoff,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Guile,
I guess so.
Commissioner Mahoney.
Aye.
Minutes are
Secretary of
adopted.
Communications?
Yeah, I just wanted to recognize, if you make any scribbles or write anything down or bring anything with you, into, actual land use decisions like the subdivision, to send it on down to Pete, it becomes part of the record. So make sure that you're sending in your stuff, it's part of the legal record when you write stuff down.
Anything that we made notes on?
So I'm taking
Yeah.
personal
Right.
notes? That was never
Personal
required.
notes.
In 6 years, that's the first time I've been told.
Yeah, there was a court case that was just out of I don't know if it's a court case or where it is, but it's out of, West Lynn.
This is my tax info.
and
I'm
so-
giving it to you.
Well, let's chat. Anyway, if you, the information that you have needs to be part of the record so that the public can inspect it. It'll be part of the LUBA appeal. The idea is transparency for everything. And then also, if you haven't yet filled out your, financial disclosures,
Do I have to put my name on it?
yes,
Laura, do I have to explain it?
no.
How is that court case on the annexations, what's the status of that?
The Park Place annexation?
No, it was.
The state
The
case.
state.
Oh, there's no, it's still working its way.
Is that right?
You're talking about voter approval?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Oh, I got somebody here.
Yeah, still on its way.
People reading my notes.
Anything else?
Yes,
No.
Never take notes.
Anything else from anyone else for the good of the order? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
There's the best one.
Yeah, that's it, that's, let
Oh,
the public
okay,
decipher that
that's a
one.
beaut. I'll use the optical character
That's a-
recognition
that's a-
on that one.
That's a Picasso.
All right, this is Patty's.
Is it a magic trick?
Okay, thanks.
I put the comment cards back in there too, Pete.
Mike,
Yeah, thank you.
now you know why.
There's the lost.